young narrative. Young, dumb American, arrogant, throwing fits, ripping shit, tearing it, imperative. Then I'm killing this mic no matter where I live. These derelict rappers acting a fool, this embarrassing is flagrant. That's the nature of this entertainment, and we can't even change it. Guilty before arraignment, now the system tainted. But when we speak, they all laugh at us. And y'all wonder why I'm lacking trust. Try to fight a giant with attorneys that can back them up. That's church versus science, both sides start acting up. I'm late on my assignment, hopping up a mile high, climbing, obviously never silent. New alignment, I'm defiant, can I describe it? Used to describe it as a young graffiti artist. Before the beard, I always got carded. Hit every bar, even though my bar's been the hardest. The scars on my face said I ain't always been the smartest, but I'll show you where my heart is. I said I'll show you where my heart is. I can show you where my heart's at. See it on my sleeves, even if the beat stops, my soul will not leave. If I never stood tall, nobody will ever see. I can show you where my heart's at. See it on my sleeve, I can show you where my heart's at. See it on my sleeve, even if the beat stops, my soul will not leave. If I never stood tall, nobody will ever see. I can show you where my heart's at. See it on my sleeve, I can show you where my...
The type of guy that would ride with the breeze. I'm higher than most people, I'm cold and icicle freeze. I'm liking to Mike Tyson, I'm a bison, a beast. I'm hot like Jamaica, like right by the beach. My pops is from a spot where they're fighting for peace. 8 years old, out there watching people fight in the streets. All these sirens only make the violence increase. Yeah, we're still not loving police. It's that bright young American, nice, dumb, arrogant. Tight on a mic, but he might need a therapist. Heart full of kerosene, head full of fairy tales. Said that you're my homie, you don't know me, but I know you very well. Roll back on some West Coast shit. This whole track is wetter than your dress code kiss. About to hit the track, running on some retro fit. I guess so lit, I guess so bitch, now let's go.
I can show you where my heart's at. See it on my sleeves, even if the beat stops, my soul will not leave. If I never stood tall, nobody will...
Ladies and gentlemen, it's Tuesday. A little sports nonsense and whiskey. Back with the fellas. Talking a little NBA finally. I see Pinky's wearing the proper hat. Robert didn't get the memo apparently, which is fine. We'll catch him up at some point.
I've got some hats.
You just easy there, Tiger. Okay, easy. We got a special guest we're going to bring on to really jump into the NBA conversation and have a good evening. So, cheers to everybody, fellas. How are we doing this evening?
Awesome, bro.
Well,
it's Tuesday.
Well, it's Tuesday. It's the best day of the week, in my opinion.
Oh man, my stolen cup. I'm loving it.
Okay. Nice. Yep.
German sports soccer team, you know.
Who is that? Who was it?
Stuttgart. My
Stuttgart.
Stuttgart. Yep. My boys. They're actually doing well this season. They are third on the table, which it has been
means nothing because
they're behind Bayern, so it's fine. But
yeah, the boys that won it like 12 years in a row look like they might lose it to Leviskin, whatever it is.
I'm just happy that they're not in the bottom tables like they have been for the last several years, and they're not going to be relegated. So I'll take third place. I'll take a podium finish.
I've always tried to pick a European team, and I just can't for one reason or another seem to pick just one right now. I always come back to a little Real Madrid. I've always kind of liked Real, but
got some interesting moves going right now too.
Yeah. Well, just the whole La Liga in general, the whole Barca situation and everything else. Yeah, we're not going to get into that now because I know a lot of people will just bounce.
Another day, but another episode.
Fair,
that's fine.
Fair. All right. One of these days, though, we'll have you drinking proper. Just throwing that out there. Pinky, you could do a little better yourself if I'm being honest about the situation.
I've got whiskey.
Oh, okay. Good boy. Attaboy.
I mean, I have whiskey. Okay, I can go get it.
You can save it for special occasions. We know Greg coming on.
My whiskey, so I gotta still.
No, you're good.
Bottle.
You're good. Just giving you a hard time, fellas, because I mean, it is the best. It is the best option as an adult beverage, I will say. And two, we do kind of have it in our. But if I'm being honest and being serious for a second, it's just a way to get people conversing with a drink in their hands and sitting around hanging out. So it really doesn't matter what's in your cup, be it alcohol or non-alcohol. It's just a way to get people to sit down and hang out together. So
the wife told me I have to start getting rid of the half-drinking bottles of whiskey in the whiskey cabinet before I can buy some more. So,
heard that before too. So I'm going through some things. Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Understood.
So
let's you want to get the nonsense
I got
a
little nonsense I want to throw out there because look, we know my nerd fandom isn't super deep. I feel like it's enough to get by in a conversation without people knowing if I didn't say anything.
Oh boy.
And I could exit before it got too deep to the point where they found me as the fraud I am. You're not even going to introduce him. You're just going to throw him up on the screen while I'm talking.
He was so sad that we didn't let him in.
Well, you could have just said, you didn't say anything. So I went into the me and Robert both were like, well, same thought. Like, this guy's just going to blow past the guest that he's invited on, and we'll just keep talking. So,
what's up, Greg?
Cool. Ladies and gentlemen, Greg Wissinger, multiple-time repeat offender, fill-in special guest, friend of the show, if I might say so. How you doing, guy?
I'm doing good. I was just actually messing around and texting Pinky's gif of let me in, the guy hanging on the fence and stuff.
Nice.
I was mostly just messing with Pinky. I didn't actually need to be let in yet.
I don't like to hurt anybody's feelings, Greg. You know how I feel. I'm just a big fan.
I like it.
No, Pinky's
I like it. No, so
good to know.
Welcome, Greg. Sit in and comment as you feel you would like to. But so some news was announced here recently about a Marvel project coming up that everybody has been hotly anticipating, which is the Final Four. And I feel like
Fantastic Four.
I don't even know where that.
I mean, we were gonna go with college basketball, so I kind of get where you're going, but that's
sorry. Other things
fine.
on the brain that I've been.
That's next month,
fine.
baby.
Yeah, my bad. Final Four. What a Fantastic Four, and it was cast. Announced, and I feel like it was a swing and a miss. And I know there's maybe some people excited about a couple of the characters, not so much about a couple of the others. But on top of that, I was reading a little bit today, and while it's complete rumor and conjecture, and it could just be post-credit scenes, I heard they're trying to include Doctor Doom, Galactus, and Silver Surfer all within the same movie. And I feel like if you do all of that, even if two of them are post-credit scenes, you already wasted a huge opportunity with the Fantastic Four and tried to cram way too much into a movie and basically pulled a Sony or a DCEU. But those are just a couple things I've heard recently. I know Robert and Pinky have even more knowledge, so feel free to shoot up in there, guys.
So,
I mean, those are rumors.
Rumors. I haven't seen much on that. One of the big Doctor Doom rumors that I'm following right now is him showing up in Deadpool. That's the big one I've got right now. I've been really treading lightly with the Fantastic Four because I'm not quite sure how they're going to tell this story yet. And I'm nervous for it because Fantastic Four has been done about as many times as, Batman now. And I'm just kind of over it. I hate saying that. It's not superhero fatigue. I just don't want to see the Fantastic Four. I want another story.
You guys might not know this, but I remember it's back in, I want to say it was the late 80s. There was a Fantastic Four cartoon series. And I watched that thing, and I loved it. I loved every second of it. And it had Magneto show up, and it had, episode 2 had, the Mole Man. I loved it. So I've always had an affinity for the Fantastic Four. I am nervous about this. I will say, for the casting, I think Vanessa Kirby will be able to play a very fine Sue Storm.
I'm so excited. I loved her in Napoleon, and I loved her in Mission Impossible, so I'm very excited to see her in this.
So I think she can pull it off. I don't know why we need to have Pedro Pascal on every Disney property imaginable, but here we are. But
talk about Pedro Pascal fatigue. Now,
he signed an old 1920s golden age of Hollywood contract where it was, here's my life. How many movies can you throw me in within a 72-hour period? Like, that's what it feels like with him at this point. And I love him. But I also don't feel like he quite fits what you would expect to see in that character. And maybe it's because of what he's played in the past. Maybe it's just because of the way his general appearance is. Maybe it's all of it, but it just seems like an odd choice for, that casting.
Yeah, I think he's a good actor, so it is very possible he could pull it off. I did like the guy who played Reed Richards in the, Chris Evans Fantastic Four 1 and 2. They did it.
I thought problems going on right now.
I thought that guy was good as Reed Richards.
I mean, John Krasinski was great as Reed Richards in Doctor Strange, but that was kind of like a fan casting to just get it out of the way and move on.
I feel like
he
doesn't want to do it. That's what I feel like that is. I feel like he doesn't want to be tied to the movie contract it would take to be a part of that. And that's why he was willing to do the one-off. It allows him to do maybe some guest appearances later on, depending on how they want to move things. If they ever want to do the multiverse kind of Fantastic Four journey or whatever. But I feel like it was more him. The more I kind of look at what he's doing now and how he's really going on that directing, trying to be more producing and everything stint, I think he didn't want to be tied to like a 6-movie contract that he had to appear in. So he was out. But maybe it was also too much of an obvious choice and they thought it might take away from the character, because that I could see where, as much as I love him, that could also be possible too with him.
Completely.
What are your thoughts, Greg? Or do you have thoughts on the Fantastic Four?
I've got a lot of thoughts on Fantastic Four. I'm a nerd too. So
yes,
I think that Pedro Pascal is probably the most curious casting of the main 4 that they announced. But overall, like, they announced 4 really great actors, like, for the 4 main roles. The other 3 I think are really good fits. I'm excited to see Joe Quinn's version of Johnny Storm. Like, that should be awesome.
He was great in Stranger Things.
It was so good. Just stole the show, right? So I'm excited about that one. And like Pedro Pascal, I mean, he's a good actor. It just kind of depends on what version of Reed Richards are doing. Like, he's not going to be the traditional one that we saw, necessarily in the other movies. But I don't think there's Fantastic Four fatigue. It's that there hasn't been a good Fantastic Four movie ever made, unless you count The Incredibles, which was basically the Fantastic Four, power set, and showed you how good that movie could be, right? Like, so I mean, I think Marvel with Pedro, I think they needed a big name to kind of carry it and kind of overcome some of the inertia against going to superhero movies that's kind of built over all the failures in Phase 4. I'm curious that it's going to be set in the 60s, like how that's going to all tie in. Like, that's an interesting wrinkle. I mean, they could have done a lot worse on the casting, and having good actors in your cast. Now, if they can just get some good writing and some, get the CGI teams long enough. I can't remember the guy's name who's directing it. It's an established director, but not like it's not like Christopher Nolan or anything.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Well,
director.
I mean, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, any other thoughts before we go into the next little bit?
Matt Shakeman is who's directing.
Sounds right.
What's he done?
I have to look. I got to go to a different page to find that.
Like the Google search should just be IMDb right below that. Come on now.
It did not.
Fail. Get off of Bing. Get off of Bing, Pinky.
Star Trek 4 Cut Bank. Just the 10 of us. He directed an episode of Game of Thrones.
Which one? Because that could be really good or really bad.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing.
He did do the WandaVision. So he directed that.
Okay, I actually liked WandaVision.
He's directed an episode of The Great. I'm a fan of that. He's directed 43 episodes of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, so I'm a fan of that. If I can get
Okay,
behind
but
that.
here's the problem with that. You could be trying to do things with the dialogue that's too much.
He's done a lot of TV, from what it looks like. He's got a lot of credits. He did an episode of The Boys, Succession.
Well, that's good.
Hey, Pinky, you know who else was mostly known for their TV work before jumping into the MCU? It was the Russo brothers.
Right.
Who did all the big,
Arrested Development.
Endgame and all that. They were Arrested Development and Community, and they were comedy TV writers. So
interesting.
I mean, Jordan Peele now has been, the modern day, horror teller. I mean, take that for what it's worth. But
yeah, new Wes Craven, Alfred Hitchcock is what he's being compared to.
I really did not enjoy some of the most recent films, but
I haven't seen any of them.
Into it.
So I don't
see Us. That was weird.
Us was weird.
Us was weird. Although it's kind of creepy if you were yelling at somebody with a bat and they're standing on your front yard and they are not leaving. That's a creepy situation.
Us is good if you watch the first 45 minutes and then turn it off.
Well, all right.
Agreed.
Any other nonsense here before we go ahead and get talking to some sports guys?
I got nothing.
Yes.
Uh-oh.
For those that don't follow, sorry. But once I mention this, I know we'll talk about it for just a hair of a second here. But it has now come out as of last Friday that The Rock is not trying to destroy Roman Reigns in the bloodline, but he has gone all the way heel and become part of the bloodline and joining Roman Reigns in his conquest of the WWE universe. And to be perfectly honest with you, I am all for this. And here's why. Because you can go two ways. He can go super heel and just run this story out for a while, a la Hollywood Hulk Hogan and NWA, which was some of the best stuff we've ever seen. So they could go that route and I'll be happy. Or they could go total fake heel and then destroy the bloodline from within and then hand it over to Cody Rhodes, whoever else is going to kind of carry the torch next for a little bit and allow the bloodline story to end. But either way, this ends awfully terrible for the bloodline. It's just how we get to the implosion and the devastatingly terrible situation that they'll find themselves in that's going to be the beauty of the story.
Conspiracy theory makes me believe that The Rock is going to intervene in the match between Roman Reigns and Cody, and that's why Cody's going to win.
I don't know how much conspiracy theory that is. That's kind of, like I said, I just said that's like Pinky. Hang on a second. I said there's two ways to go.
But I was making it clear.
Okay, well, did I not lay that out clear? Did I say something that left it pretty vague? I didn't realize I did that. I'm sorry.
I just think Pinky wanted his 2 cents to be heard.
No, but seriously, I would only say it's not conspiracy theory because that's what everybody's saying. It's going to go one of those two ways. And there's a lot of people really mad that The Rock turned heel, which I love because it was not expected when people thought he was coming back. And you hear The Rock music. Stone Cold never went heel, right? He was never necessarily a good guy either. He would just come out and he was going to be Stone Cold, and you didn't know if you were going to get a drink and a cheers or a drink and a stunner. It just kind of depended on how the rattlesnake was feeling, right? He might bite you. He might just slither away. But The Rock was always, good for the most part. There were some times where he was kind of on the not necessarily liked groups, if you will, but wasn't always. It was never bad. This is Hollywood Hogan, and I'm here. All black bandana, all the way down to the cowboy boots change. This is that.
Well, keep it in mind that now he is with Vince McMahon being removed by the board. He is now one of the board members.
Yeah, of TKO.
And he's going to have a more involved. He's going to be more involved in everything.
Triple H is they're probably doing everything they can to go ahead and push him and Stephanie out as well. If we're being honest, they're probably trying to get all new blood in there, and this is just the beginning, I think.
Right. Are you privy to this, Greg? Are you any type of wrestling fan? I forget if you're a wrestler.
No, I have not been a wrestling fan since the late 90s. But it is interesting, just kind of the parallels, because you mentioned like the Hollywood Hogan thing. Well, the big downfall of WCW was Hollywood Hogan coming in, taking over, having script say and kind of final call on his matches, refusing to follow storylines. Like, okay, so now I'm hearing The Rock has gone heel and has all sorts of this extra control. Like,
well,
what could go wrong?
So yes, in that sense, but no, because basically what ended up happening after that is Hogan went back to Vince McMahon and goes, dude, you could totally buy them out right now.
Right.
Like, we've got this wrapped up. Like, and Vince was like, oh yeah, I can monopolize this finally. Let's do that. Yeah. It's not like the ECW is going to go buy out the WWE. Like, there's not another situation here where that. So regardless of if for whatever reason the storyline goes in some fork in the road and straight instead of what everybody believes are the only two options, and they just fall on their face and handle it just awfully, it doesn't matter because they'll just act like it never happened and start something completely different. And there's nothing anybody can do.
All I know is this bloodline storyline is so played out. It needs to go.
Yeah.
It's done. Let's move on. It's been 4 or 5 years. Let's move on. So, all right.
There you go.
Robert, I believe you have some questions for our guest.
Yes. So, Greg, since you're coming on here, it's been a little while. Just going to get to know you a little bit for everybody that's watching. So, got 3 questions for you. What is your favorite sport, your favorite nonsense, nerd, whatever you want it to be, thing, and then your favorite whiskey or alcoholic beverage?
So, favorite sport is NBA. I'm a big diehard NBA fan for the Sacramento Kings. I write, edit, manage the kingsherald.com. And favorite nonsense thing, I do like movies. I'm a big movie buff, especially the Marvel movies, but movies of all sorts. And then
hold on that point, Greg.
Sure.
This guy actually writes down a list of movies he's seen and then ranks them throughout the year. And he will go back through and kind of like, oh, this movie was really good. And he puts it up to like, his rankings are awesome. It's a great way to kind of look at the year, see what movies came out, and then be able to look and say, wait a minute, I didn't see that. Let's talk about that for a sec. So.
I only rank movies that I saw for the first time in a year. Like, I don't rank every movie I watch in a year because I rewatch a lot of stuff too. But any new movie that I watch, I put it on my list.
Very nice.
And then, sorry, what was the last question? Oh, alcohol?
Yep. What's your favorite alcoholic beverage or whiskey?
So I'm not a big whiskey fan. If I do sip on some whiskey, it's usually something basic, just like a bullet bourbon, with splash water in there. But mostly I stick to just good old-fashioned Rocky Mountain water, Coors Light, which is what I'm drinking here tonight.
Colorado Kool-Aid.
Well, excellent. Well, let's go ahead then and start talking some NBA. There's been a lot of stuff going on. All-Star game this last weekend. So, Greg, if you want, go ahead and, share your thoughts on this last weekend.
I mean, I'm enough of a fan of basketball that I refuse to subject myself to the All-Star game weekend. Like, All-Star weekend is trash. Like, I don't watch it at all. Like, so if y'all have takes on it, I'm happy to hear it. But I mean, it has not been worth watching in years now.
Yeah, you're so right, my friend. Pinky, I mean, you know me pretty well. Robert's getting to know me. Greg kind of has a feel for me now. I'm a bit of a glutton for punishment, especially when it comes to sports. And if it's on, especially if it's the only thing, I'm going to be tuning in at least a little bit while I'm doing other things. And I watched this because I can't help myself. I have a problem, guys. It is what it is. Okay, I know it. But I'm not changing it. Like that's just, I'm not getting help for it. It's accepted and we move on. So
we're going to have an intervention.
Yeah. It's not going to do you any good, unfortunately, when it comes to this, but it was bad. And bad doesn't even do justice to what it really was. That's just me being polite and nice at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, even Adam Silver said as much without actually coming out and bashing the product that it was. Basically said that it was an awful product and we need to change it, but he doesn't know how. The All-Star weekend starts with, you know, the celebrity game, which is a waste of time and has been since its induction. You might get a couple funny moments here and there, but it's really not worth watching.
I'm going to disagree. I actually enjoy the celebrity game just because I like seeing normal people go out there and play basketball. Some of it not good, and some of them are better than you think they'd be.
Well, there's a reason I don't like it. I'll lay that out here for you in a second. I understand what you're saying, and I guess in that aspect, a lot of people might enjoy it, and it could be fun.
I'll lay out Kevin Hart bulldogging guys. That's pretty fun.
I'll lay out for you why I think it's a waste of time, personally. So it starts with that Friday night and the Rising Stars game, which the Rising Stars game, just like the All-Star game itself, used to be good when it first started. Now it's a waste of time. Guys just don't try. They look at it as an exhibition, which it is, but they look at it as a true exhibition, and we're out there just to goof around with each other in front of people and maybe do a couple good dunks, and that's kind of what everybody feels it as now.
There's too much money out there, man.
Rising Star game, blah. Now we get to Saturday night. It used to be, even more so than the All-Star game itself, used to be the creme de la creme. The whole reason you watched the weekend for sure was Saturday night, because you were going to get the three-point contest and the dunk contest. Then they realized that was both going in the hole, and they added the skills competition. Now, the skills competition, in its theory, had a good thought. Could they make it better? Has it ever been good? No. But could it be? Maybe. At least when it first started, it required skill. You were actually trying to throw a basketball through basically the size of a hoop from distance and be accurate with your passes and go through an obstacle course. Greg, what they had this year as what you had to throw your passes through, the smallest one, and I'm not even joking to you right now, the smallest one was the opening of a tractor tire. Okay? That's the smallest one, and it went up from there. So there's that. Then you get to the three-point competition, and while you had some good shooters, you didn't have the best shooters and the best three-point shooters from that season in the competition. And once they started doing that, like Greg said years ago, it became a joke right away. And the fact that guys aren't willing to participate in this is a problem. And the only reason, and I'm not joking, the only reason to not participate in any of these events as we move forward and I keep discussing is because you're scared to look like a fool. Because simply, if you're at All-Star Weekend already, because you're an All-Star, there's no reason not to compete in the events. Now, if you weren't an All-Star and you want to take the weekend off to go spend time with family or vacation or whatever, and you want to decline the invite, even if you are one of the best shooters, fine. I'm good with that. But if you're already part of All-Star Weekend and you're declining the opportunity to be in these events, it's a joke. So that happened with the three-point contest. Also, side note, they keep talking like the guys shooting in the three-point contest and the scores they're putting up are all-time great. They're not. There's an entire rack of money balls. That didn't used to exist, ladies and gentlemen. It used to be one money ball per rack. So these inflated scores, don't listen to them. They're nonsense. Read our title. We know what we're talking about. Then you move on to the dunk contest, which was an absolute joke. I hear Matt McClung talking all the way leading up to it. He's got 3 dunks that nobody's ever seen, or at least have never attempted in an NBA dunk contest. He did one that was pretty nice that I hadn't seen in a contest before, really. And then after that, it turned into who can jump over the highest or tallest stack of people. And that was it. So the fact that you have a G League player who, while can jump and do some nice dunks, winning the dunk contest for a repeat is pathetic, because I know for a fact there are dudes in the NBA that if they really wanted to could do the same dunk these professional dunkers doing with the 720s and the throw it up to myself, spin backwards, all this other stuff, dunk kind of stuff. They just don't, because again, if they miss, they feel embarrassed. It might lower their score. They might not compete at a high level because of how difficult it is. So it's worthless. And then you get to the game, and it's the highest scoring game of all time. It was basically 100 at halftime. Like, it's just not, it's not entertaining or fun to watch. It makes a mockery of the skill these guys really have. And unfortunately for me personally as a fan and somebody who grew up playing the game and coaching it and everything else, I know the skill level on a very personal level because I played with guys who ended up in the league. I know what they have as skill. And so for them to not truly be showcasing that for people anymore and using this weekend to really highlight how incredible they are at this sport, especially the game itself, when they get to come together. And even if you're running a basic offense and just trying to play some solid defense, you would still see a product that you don't see on a night-to-night basis because it's all NBA level players, right? All playing together, not just, you know, your couple top stars and then your mediocre talent. And that's no disrespect to the guys that aren't top. It's just, it is what it is, right? So I'm very disappointed. The reason I said, Pinky, that I'm not a big fan of the celebrity game is because what I would really personally like to see them do with this All-Star weekend, and I think it's real simple. One, everybody care. And I don't care if you don't want to play it 100%, but give it 90. Give it 85, right, at a minimum. And go out there in the game, and you'd see something that is actually pretty special, I think. As far as Saturday night goes, you invite the top talent, and these guys aren't scared to fail. And if they do fail, it becomes a conversation where it starts becoming normalized, and people start understanding how what they were trying to accomplish because of the difficulty levels was damn near impossible. So when guys actually start succeeding, it becomes really awesome and special, rather than people laughing or joking about the failures themselves for not attempting something correctly. 3-point contest, invite the best shooters for that year. Whether you want to do the highest percentage or the most makes, there's a couple different ways you could do it. True shooting, I don't care how you want to decide it, but set a criteria ahead of time. Let everybody know what you're going to use to pick the contestants and go with that for a while. And then on Friday night, what I think would be really cool to see, honestly, is basically talking with Ice Cube and almost creating a NBA Legends, if you will, Big Three type league, and having some of the NBA Legends come back and competing on Friday night in a tournament themselves to allow people to still kind of see what that skill level looks like. Or something to that effect where it's more honoring the stars of the game rather than just having a bunch of celebrities run around acting a fool. So that's what I'd like to see from the weekend personally.
So before we ask Greg what his thoughts would be to fix it, I did want to ask Greg, did you see the best play of the game?
No.
Did you see the highlights of the best play?
Oh, that was so terrible, but I know exactly which.
It's so amazing.
You had guys
missing and then the half
next
court
to Jokic like he's a special needs student, Pinky. Like it
was
so terrible.
It was ridiculous. It was really ridiculous. It was Luka and Joker just literally tapping the ball to each other all the way down the court, never dribbling it at all. And as soon as they get right to the basket, Joker just throws it behind him. Shea's there for the dunk.
That's fine.
Like there's no dribble at all. And I know Joker and Luka said, you know what, this will be really funny if we do this.
Yeah.
And they did it.
Well, but here's the problem. They knew it would be funny because nobody would actually try to guard him, right? But it's also amazing that it's those two that thought of it to do it because they are the most fundamentally sound coming from where they came from in their background to the point where they understand that you can get the ball all the way up the court without dribbling. It's actually the fastest. What's the word I'm looking for? Like, no, I want to say consistent, but consistent's not right. I'm drawing a blank, but efficient. It's the fastest, most efficient way to move the ball anywhere on the basketball court. And when you can an outlet and then go and never touch the ground, like that's like a coach's wet dream. So the fact that those
funny.
two are the ones that did it is hilarious.
I find it really funny that it's the two guys that actually aren't very good in the All-Star game, and they really don't care about the All-Star game because they know like the game's not for us. There's no fundamentals in that game. Really, it's shoot, no defense. So you could see the way they play. They're just there. They like really don't put a lot of effort in themselves. I mean, Joker he stole a ball and almost went for a dunk himself. So that was pretty amazing. But again, nobody even got in front of Joker. Like it was crazy. So yeah, I'm not a huge All-Star fan. I have not been a huge All-Star fan for a long time. It amazes me that it gets worse and worse. It's pretty much at the point where the NFL was, which is now why they've gone to like flag football, which has made it even like, why are we even watching this? I think we only watch it for Peyton and Eli is really the only reason why we watch it, to hear what those guys are saying. Because other than that, it's pretty worthless.
So a couple thoughts. So first on the idea of kind of bringing back the old timers, the NBA All-Star game used to have an old timers game. They had to get rid of it because guys kept having like devastating injuries and people got tired of seeing like old legends like blowing out their knees and like having heart attacks on the floor. Like you can't be having that. Now I did see one idea, which was, maybe do a play off of what they did with like Steph and Sabrina Ionescu and bring legends back to compete in like shootouts and stuff like that. Or
I'm good with that too. Absolutely.
Like get Reggie Miller out there to do a 3-point contest. I'm sure he can still shoot. Like that's a skill that doesn't go away, but is he as sharp? Like, could he do it? Like, I think that'd be fun. But really, I think the underlying issue with all these events, with people not wanting to do them, people not wanting to try, because anyone who's played any level of basketball knows that you can play a competitive pickup game and still do things where, no one's expecting guys to be challenging at the rim with verticality. No one's expecting you to like cut under shooters. Like there's ways you can be safe and still play a competitive, pickup basketball game and play some defense. And we know this especially because we saw it in the All-Star games not that long ago. 10 years ago, it was still common to see good defense in All-Star games, which is where I think that the biggest issue that they have right now is that none of the best players in the league are psychotic assholes. And what I mean by that is you think about the older generation. So Larry Bird, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Kevin Garnett, those types of guys could not stand to lose at anything ever. It did not matter the stakes. It did not matter anything. They were competitive to a fault. It's why they were great, but it was also kind of a detriment. But they set the tone in those events. Nowadays, the best players in the league, LeBron, Giannis, Jokic, Luka, you go on down the list. Tatum, Steph, AD, Kawhi, none of those guys are that way. Like if you look at the list of the best players in the NBA, you have to get down to like Jimmy Butler, who is kind of old and banged up and not the guy he once was anymore, before you get to anyone who's even close to that level of like psycho, I have to win everything all the time. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's probably very healthy for guys to not be in that mindset. But it does hurt the product when you're looking at an exhibition game that you need one guy to take it seriously to inspire everyone else to take it seriously. Because if one guy is doing it, then you have that whole thing of your only motivation is not to look bad. If one guy starts taking it seriously and making you look bad, you're going to start playing harder. So they have to have someone who has that fire and refuses to lose at anything, no matter how low the stakes are. And then you'll start seeing these events come back. And, same thing with the shooting, 3-point contest, dunk contest. Like you need guys that are so driven to win everything that the idea of losing and looking bad hasn't even occurred to them. Now,
yeah, I think that's well said. I think that's
I love that take, actually.
It's a personality of the game that was always there and has seemed to have died out to an extent over the last, what do you want to call it, decade, maybe 15 years. Obviously, Kobe played within those last 15 years, but even when Kobe was playing, you could see this
Mm-hmm.
thought starting to change a little bit, where everybody's friends off the court, and so they get on the court and you see them dapping and hugging, regardless of a win or loss. And
I'm going to push back on that. So I think that has nothing to do with it.
Well, so hang on. That's not exactly where I was going. I'm not doing the tribe. Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not doing the contrived media thing, because I believe you can still have that relationship and then want to kill him on the court, right? Between the lines, still want to destroy your opponent, even if it's your best friend. But I feel like that narrative's been pushed so much that there's a level of truth to it because of what you're saying about basically there's not an asshole in the league. So while
there's lots of assholes, they're just not the best players.
Right. Yeah. So while guys care about winning, there isn't also that persona of cutthroatness that exists in the regular season. Like, I think it's still there in the playoffs. Maybe not the same intensity if we're going to put it on levels, if you will.
Yeah.
But still there in the playoffs, but not really in the regular season. And that's due to so many things. Load management to, go to the top of the list. But so because of that, and then you have the All-Star game in the middle of the season, guys look at it more as a break to rest up even more. That all those factors really kind of almost force the hand of it being what it is these days. And like you said, you don't get guys trying, and you don't have that one guy who wants to be competitive at everything from, flipping coins to actually playing the game. It's hard to give it that level of intensity.
So, I mean, a great example of what you're talking about with you can be friends, but you have to still be willing to go kill the guy on the floor. There's a clip that goes around from the Redeem Team documentary. And I'm not even a big Kobe fan. I hated Kobe. I'm a Kings fan. I always hated Kobe. But there's a clip of him from that Redeem Team where they had a matchup early on with the Redeem Team against Spain. And to set the tone, the very first play, Kobe Bryant trucks Paul Gasol, who is his guy. Like, he is, Uncle Pau to the kids, like his best friend in the NBA. And he trucks him on a screen, like, first play, like, just to set the tone, right? Like, that's the type, again, that's why I go back to, you need the psychotic asshole who just cannot stand to ever lose, who happens to also still be one of the best players. Like, there just isn't enough of that. And that's not an easy fix, right? Like, you have to have that combination of a guy with that mentality who also is skilled enough to be the best. And it's a testament to so many of these guys that they can be so great while still not having that level of intensity about it. Like, it's one of my favorite things about Jokic is that, like, he's the best player in the world and could not care less about this game. Like, it's just a job he goes to. Like,
you know what would fix it? I just thought of this, Greg. This would instantly fix everything. Instantly fix everything. You move the All-Star game to right after the season is over, and you hold it in Rucker Park in the middle of July.
That sounds
because
hot.
With that crowd, they would never allow you to goof around and not take something seriously as you're getting punked at the same time. You would be forced to then have to show up and try to do something special, because if you didn't, you would hear some dude who lives in the apartment above the courts talking about how you're a bum and could never exist in real basketball. You know what I mean? It would just be like, they'd be like, man, that OG's calling you out, bro. And he's been around since the game existed. Doesn't matter that he's only 35.
I do not think putting the game after the season is going to make anyone care more.
Right. No, absolutely. It would be amazing. It would be amazing. Everybody wants to play at Rucker Park.
Side note.
Man, they can all go. Like, guys have been doing it for years. They'll just show up for a summer pickup game. Like, it's not like
fix everything. Rucker Park. Make it happen.
Side note, Greg, since we're kind of talking about psychotic assholes, and you mentioned Bird and Magic, have you watched Winning Time on HBO Max?
I started it. I did not finish it, but
I did the same thing.
But I thought it was very good. It just didn't hold me, especially when I found out it had been canceled. I was like, all right, I'm good.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't watched season 2 yet, but season 1, I did enjoy. In Magic's head, Larry was always there talking shit. Like, that's what I found hilarious.
Yeah, because that's literally what Larry Bird did. Like,
he was But it was literally not in the game. It was like Magic would be at home, and like a Larry Bird commercial would come on, and Larry Bird would be talking to him in the commercial, talking shit like that.
I know, but like again, that's
hilarious.
what Larry did. Like in all aspects of life. That's why him and Jordan got along so well. That's why him and Magic got along so well, because he talked shit to Magic, and then Magic would have to go try to prove him wrong. Because that's just Magic's the nicest guy in the world, but if you tell him he can't do something, he's going to turn around and prove you wrong. Like that's just his personality. He's so competitive. So Larry, being as good as he was, could back up a lot of the shit talking. But by all accounts, he's arguably probably the biggest shit talker in the NBA history, and also was the best one at ever backing up any of it, even better than Jordan. Like when you tell people you're going to use your left hand for an entire game and hang 40 plus because you're saving your good hand for a better team the next night, like that's just a small idea of what Larry the Legend did.
I don't know if any of you guys have seen it, but there was a documentary. It was like 2010. It was a Magic and Bird. It was an HBO documentary, and it just dives into it and all the stories directly from them. And I mean, those two fed on each other their entire careers, going back to college. I mean, they played against each other collegiate national championship, and it was the constant one-upsmanship, and it was a bitter rivalry, but they both held like a secret fondness for each other throughout the whole thing and became friends after. And like, I mean, their relationship was great, but yeah, I mean, Larry Bird, the ultimate shit talker, when he did the 3-point contest, there's the story of him walking in the locker room and saying, "Which one of you motherfuckers coming in second?"
And then proceeded to win without ever taking
and then he won it. Like, just in the last shot walks off.
I did know this.
Robert, we're gonna give you some homework. Do some Larry Bird research.
Oh, yeah.
I do know some good Larry Bird, Magic Johnson stuff. So
there you go.
Again, my entire family, or well, I shouldn't say my entire
Michigan
family.
State
A majority of my family went to Michigan State. So in turn, a lot of my family members became Lakers fans. So I always grew up with that.
0 for 2 there.
Like, hey, I was just born into it. Okay, I don't really follow much. I'm just going off what I know.
He goes Sparty's rule. I don't know what they did.
Go ahead.
So I've always known the Magic and Bird rivalry. So I've always gotten to know that really well. So there's not much that it surprises me. I just haven't really put a lot of it to like screen to watch and understand. But I've heard a lot of these stories and things that happened and know where they ended up, and I find that to be very awesome. I just haven't really committed to it because I don't know a lot of basketball stuff. It's never been a sport of mine.
I think this is a good segue into a question I have for you, Greg. Running some NBA chats today, and we were talking about, and I wanted to ask you this: is Steph Curry a top 10 all-time NBA player?
Oh, we're going right into that, huh?
Oh man, right out of the chute.
Before we talk about this season, we've been talking a little bit about the old guys. I feel like this was a good time to bring it up.
Okay.
Is Steph Curry a top 10 all-time NBA player?
I think it'd be more challenging to make an argument that he isn't.
Okay.
Ooh,
so,
I like that.
I think we would all agree with you. But I wanted to see, because I did ask Chat GPT and Google Gemini to list the top 10
I love
NBA
that he's
players.
using these, just side note, love that he's using these as like relevant, honest, solid sources for this information.
They pull this data from a lot of different sources to come up with this information.
I know. I just think it's hilarious because I've seen some of the lists these things put out, and they're not.
Well,
they're not. No,
their top 10 was the same. Their top 10 was just a little bit different order. So, but these top 10 players were on both lists: Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, Tim Duncan, Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant. All 10 players were on both lists. Jim and I just had them in a little bit different order. Who do we kick out? If we're putting Steph Curry in that top 10, who do we kick out?
Sorry, I'm having some computer issues. Could you give me that list one more time?
Sure. Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, Tim Duncan, Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant.
I already said my position. I'd kick out Kobe first.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, he said
I'm an established Kobe hater.
You gotta give him that.
Okay, so let me ask you this to dig a little bit deeper on that. Is it more and I don't care either way, as long as you're honest about the answer. Is it more a disdain for Kobe that you have him outside the top 10 just because of him, his persona, everything that goes along with Kobe Bryant? Or is it truly basketball career?
Combination. I'd say it's a combo. So give me a quick second. I got to pull some stuff up here real quick.
I like this. I like when numbers come into play here. Let's hear it, Greg.
Yeah, because I mean, you got to be able to back this stuff up, right?
I've got some things floating around in my head already about this, so I'm curious if this is the same things you're going to discuss.
I have no dog in this fight, so I'm just chilling.
Robert's like, I don't know enough to be honest about my opinion.
Yep.
I mean, so one of the biggest things that kind of buffered Kobe's numbers was longevity, right?
Sure.
If you look on like a season by season basis, yes, he had some phenomenal seasons. He definitely did. But, you know, aside from a couple of them, I mean, kind of really in his core, he was riding Shaq for the beginning of his career. He was second fiddle.
Okay.
He was.
Okay.
Like, that's a big factor in the way I view it. And then, you know, when you look at beyond, you know, when you got later in the career, he was definitely great, but the years he had shitty teammates, he just put up empty numbers and padded stats, and you know, so the career numbers look a lot better because of those awful seasons when his team sucked and he was just, you know, racking up the counting points. Like, you know, stat pattern gets thrown around a lot, but Kobe was the ultimate in the bad seasons. Like, I mean, he did. Like, he would put up, you know, like 40 points on 38 shots in a loss. Like,
I mean, the 81 against Toronto is a good example of that. As much as people don't want to discuss that as part of that scoring outburst. So I do believe there's some truth to what you're saying, and I do understand where you're coming from.
And again, I will fully admit that a big part of this is just me also being a bit of a hater. Like,
you be a hater, baby.
I fully embrace the hater status and kind of what is coloring my analysis.
I appreciate that. I will say the one thing that's always bugged me a little bit about Kobe, on a whole, when it comes to his game, was he really wasn't the greatest shooter. Even calling him a good shooter might be stretching just a little bit based on his overall percentage.
That's because he took so many damn shots. He's like,
yes, exactly.
It's like watching Trae Young play.
So while he did show up big time in big moments a lot, and I do believe without Kobe, Shaq doesn't three-peat there. Phil Jackson doesn't three-peat there. I think.
Oh, of course. I'm not saying that he had no part in it.
Well, I'm not saying, and not to say that that's what you were saying. I just view him more as a 1A option to Shaq's 1. And I'll probably take a slight step further, and I'd say there wasn't a 1A. It was Shaq, and then Kobe is a 1B. So he's even a slight step down from that. But if Kobe wasn't able to be who he was after he realized, because the first year and a half in the league, he came off the bench. But I feel like once he finally figured out who he was and that he could really play in this league and started really being the image-ish, if you will, of Michael Jordan, that's part of the reason they went on that three-peat run, and then he won 2 with Paul. Because if we're being honest, that Lakers team, when he went back-to-back with Powell and Lamar Odom and, you know, some of the guys that were on that roster, that wasn't a super talented roster. There's zero reason the Celtics and that team should have lost to the Lakers other than the fact that it's Kobe Bryant and Paul Pierce is wildly overrated. We'll talk about that another time. But I believe Kobe, my true only issue with him was a lot of shots and not the best make percentage. But he was one of the last true two-way players who cared. And what he could really do on the defensive end of the court and then still dominate you on the offensive side, that doesn't exist in today's game at all. Not even a little bit. So I have a lot of respect for that as playing all of a game of basketball, as simply as I can put it.
Let me ask this question, Greg. So if we didn't remove Kobe, which I think I'm in agreement, I would probably remove Kobe and put Steph in.
Oh.
But if we don't remove Kobe, I feel like the only other I feel like there's a conversation to be had about Wilt Chamberlain. Because I feel like he's like the Jim Brown of the NBA. Like he played against short white dudes and just literally dominated at his size. So it was kind of unfair. And Jim Brown, like as a running back, defensive players were like smaller than him, and he was at running back. I mean, it was just like a guy who was just a man amongst boys. So I feel like that's the one. The other thought is Bill Russell, and maybe it's because I haven't really watched a lot of Bill Russell play. I mean, he was on that Celtics team in the 60s. They dominated for a decade. So that's what, again, with as many champions as he got, it's hard to say he should be off the list, but
domination.
That's domination, Robert. I'll agree.
I'm sorry. I just had to throw that out there.
I don't know enough about his, like what he actually did. Like technically should Oscar Robertson be on this list? Because I've heard a lot of good things of what Oscar Robertson did. Right. So
I'm
what are your thoughts there?
I'm going to use this as an opportunity to kind of pivot the conversation slightly. So as much as these types of discussions are excellent fodder for podcasts or, you know, TV shows or anything like that, I think they're mostly terrible discussions to ever have. I think that what you should really discuss is who was the best player in a given era, because the rules change and the eras are different, and it's so hard to compare across eras what someone accomplished versus someone else. You know, you take Wilt Chamberlain, for example. He played in a very different era. Scoring was higher, similar to how it is today. I think you're underselling the level of talent during that era. Like there were still some phenomenal basketball players, like some truly legendary guys, like guys who their records are still not being broken in different ways, or like, you know, the stat music counts pull together like, well, with these four qualifiers, it's only ever been Jokic and like Elgin Baylor and Wilt Chamberlain and Oscar Robertson. It's like, okay, so like, what are we doing here? Like, we can't totally discount that era. Wilt Chamberlain also had a ton of NBA rules changed because he was so dominant. Like they had to change goaltending. They had to change the shot clock and backcourt violation rules. They had to change the way free throws worked. Like there were all these changes based on this guy being so dominant in the game. Like, you know, same way that they changed rules for Shaq, right? Like whenever a guy's that dominant, like I give that a little bit of credit.
We can all agree Wilt Chamberlain was a machine on and off the court.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Oscar Robertson, similar thing. And some of it is the era. There was definitely like much higher scoring during some of his accolades, but you still look at what he's done and it's incredibly impressive. I think the much more interesting conversation is to have those debates about, you know, the most dominant players of a given era, because it's just going to be a more apples to apples comparison. I mean, you know, if I look at some of my favorite players from the 90s and the way they stack up to guys now, they look like bums. And it's like, well, it's not that they were bad. It's just that it was a different era. Like scoring was completely different. The pace of the game was completely different. And, you know, they were still dominant for their era.
Greg, Thank you. Cheers to you, good sir. I love that take more than I can explain. It's how I feel. It's what I've been saying for a long time. Like I do still love having the top 10 debates, just because I think about all those things. And I look at because I like to think I'm a little bit of a historian, so I go back and watch all the old videos if I can, or if it's available, and kind of see how they moved and what they were doing. And okay, well, that was the fundamentals and the way the game was played now, but do they have the movement, the footwork, things of that nature, where I can easily see them adapting to today's game, and things of that nature. So I love doing that. But I more agree with you 100% that it's more fun for me to really talk about guys and comparing eras of their time against each other, and then saying, well, these are the top 4 or 5 guys from that era, and these are the top 4 or 5 from that era and this era, because of the way the game's changed. And you think about, just kind of throwing it out here, and I know you'll love this reference. I think about a guy like the big dog, Glenn Robinson, playing in today's game with the spacing and being able to play from 18 feet and in and turn his back to the basket. And no true real power forwards exist that can do that, and how he would match up and play in today's game, where he was considered an all-star and really good in his day, but not an all-time great. What would he look like in today's game? And kind of doing that thought process with it. So with all that being said, Greg, I would love to hear, since this is new information to us and moving the direction a little bit, and pivot one more time.
Ross, settle down.
Who would you say is more dominant in this era, LeBron or Steph?
Well,
I have an answer. So
let me ask you a quick follow-up.
More than happy to throw
How
it out.
are we defining this era?
I mean, they both basically were drafted at the same time, give or take a couple years, obviously, on the front end. Steph came in, 3 years after LeBron?
His rookie season was 09-010, and LeBron's been around since 03.
03.
6 years.
That's a bigger gap than I remember it being. Was Steph?
And there were some
09?
prime years, like
Was this really 09? Because I thought it was 07.
It was 09.
I mean, I'll fact check him.
I pulled it up.
That's fair.
I had Steph's numbers up because I was looking at something else. So.
No, that's fair. I was thinking Steph was 07, so I wasn't thinking it was as big of a gap as it.
Yeah.
I mean, call it the last decade. Call it 2000, last 15 years even. 2010 on, last 10 to 15 years. Who would you say has been more dominant?
No, I mean
the last decade, if you will.
That's fine. I mean, whatever time frame we use, honestly, the answer is still LeBron. I mean, he's been, with the exception of the last maybe 3 years, he's been pretty much unquestioned as the best player in the NBA.
And
every
the face
season.
of the NBA.
What's that?
The face of the NBA.
The face of the NBA, and multiple titles with multiple franchises. Has had tremendous success. He's been an all-star for 20 straight years. Like, he's anyone that you could conceive. Like, we're arguing about whether or not Steph is top 10 all time, and the argument with LeBron is he the best all time compared to Michael Jordan? Like, those are completely different arguments. I mean, it's in the LeBron James era. LeBron James is the most dominant player.
I think we could agree. Like, in the last 3 to 4, like you said,
he's falling off, but he's also like he's my age. Like, I'm breaking down, and I don't have to go out there and run around like he does.
And you haven't played like 60,000 minutes of basketball.
He's the all-time scoring leader in NBA history.
Same amount of titles.
I got to throw this out.
Argue Steph has had a bigger impact on the game overall.
He's definitely changed the game overall. I'm not going to argue that.
I'm not a LeBron guy, but even I can agree from day one, he came in as like the biggest prospect of like all time. He lived up to that. He's won titles with multiple teams, multiple teammates.
I will say he surpassed it, regardless of what anybody wants to argue, and I can lay out why, but I will actually say he didn't just live up to the hype and the expectations of the chosen one. I would argue he surpassed.
We can agree.
Yeah.
So
we agree. Funny thing, real quick. I just want to put it out since I researched it. Greg was correct. 2009 was Steph Curry's rookie year.
Since I researched it just now to make sure that he wasn't wrong.
To make sure I wasn't misreading Basketball Reference.
And this is not to hate on LeBron, because I've been a huge fan of his since the first time I saw him playing at St. Vincent St. Mary's live on ESPN. I was telling people when he came to the league, he was going to be a big deal. Pay attention. I remember watching his first game in Sacramento where he scored like 25 and had 9 assists and 7 rebounds or whatever.
He looked like a seasoned vet.
Looked like a stud.
Nuts.
Looked like a stud. So I am a big LeBron fan, but when I talk about him in his career and people start asking me to compare him to this, that, or the other, it starts coming off as me being a hater. And I know that that's contradictory, and I hate doing it all the time. But I would actually argue Steph has been more dominant in the last decade to 15 years, if you will. And the reason being is because he did it all with the same team without minus Kevin Durant.
I was going to say, like, you can't just...
minus Kevin Durant, but I'm going to include that here in a second. I'll explain why. The way he's gone about it, I feel like was more dominant than jumping back and forth. But again, when I say I'm contradictory, this is why. I will say I think LeBron had to leave Cleveland. I think he had to go to Miami. That was his college experience. That was him going to a Duke or North Carolina, learning how to win, becoming part of a culture, seeing what that was really like, to be able to teach Cleveland what it is, because Cleveland had no idea. They were so dysfunctional, it was beyond ridiculous. So I don't hate LeBron for going to Miami. I'm not one of those guys. However, I feel like he came back to Cleveland with Kyrie already there. He requested Kevin Love to come. There were some concessions made to make it an instant contender, where Steph, along with Clay and Draymond, built it from the ground up. So regardless of how you want to look at that, to me, I do hold that in a little bit more power, because they did it, and I'm not going to say the right way, they just did it in a way where they had to go from the ground up rather than grabbing things when it's already in progress.
Homegrown.
Yeah, call it what you want.
But here's the issue I have with that, if I can, before you make the rest of it.
Go ahead.
That's on the front office, not on the player. Like, you look at what LeBron did in Cleveland with the talent around him. Like, LeBron James went to the NBA Finals where the second best player on his team was Larry Hughes. And Zydrunas Ilgauskas and Drew Gooden and Sasha Pavlovich. I mean, like, you look at the supporting cast he had on that team, and it's like, how in the world did that man get this team to the NBA Finals? Like I think he would have been more than happy to stay in Cleveland. Like,
you're not wrong there, but that says more about
poorly
the
built.
Eastern Conference as a whole at that time than it does.
Sure, but
necessarily LeBron and his greatness to me. Now the finals weren't. Everybody thinks it was a blowout because they got swept. Actually, the games weren't that bad. But the Spurs obviously handled their business in that series, and it was no contest. But what I would say to that, Greg, is guys have to be willing to make some concessions when you are able to home grow from the ground up those types of stars, and have to be willing to sacrifice a little bit of their own game for everybody to be as successful as they are. And I know I'm a little bit in the minority, but I think Klay Thompson is all-time great. All-time great. He played both ends of the court at a very high level. And if he doesn't get those 2 years taken away from him, I think we have a very different conversation about his overall career and where he's at if you want to start ranking guys, especially when it comes to all-time great small forwards.
No, he was an elite.
He was shooting guards.
At his pre-injury, he was elite two-way player. Like, fantastic defender and elite shooter. Like, yeah, no argument.
So that brings me to my next point, which leads back to what you were talking about. For Steph to, and I'm going to say allow Kevin Durant to then come to that team to continue winning, I think it becomes Steph as the ultimate team leader guy because it says, I'm willing to take a back seat, if you will, to somebody who I know can help us. And look, I know what happened, right? I get it. But I still believe Steph was the best player on that team. I still believe Steph is better than Durant. But Steph was willing to say, look, I know that this keeps us winning at an insane level where nobody will beat us. And all I truly care about is winning. So I'm willing to sacrifice my touches, my scoring, my whatever you want to call it, for this guy to go off and us keep winning because I just want to keep winning, period. And if we can do it, I'll keep doing it. And so that to me says I'm a leader on a different level. And that's all I truly care about, regardless of if I keep putting up numbers or not. I want to keep doing that. So I take all that into consideration when I look at sheer dominance of the last decade and the fact that they have the same number of titles. As far as I'm concerned, played with the same number of superstars and talent around them in that time, basically. Steph grew something and was a part of something that I don't feel LeBron's ever really been a part of, which is taking something and developing it into greatness rather than being great and then kind of pulling other things into what you feel needs to keep that greatness going, if that makes sense. And I'm not faulting LeBron for it. It's just my preference.
The only counter I would have there is that during that time with Durant in Golden State, it was always still Steph's team, and Steph didn't actually really give up anything. Like, he took one shot per game less than his career average.
Yep.
Like, one whole shot. Like, the sacrifice came from everyone else. Like, Steph, like, plays the goody guy, but he's got an ego the size of, the arena. Like, I mean, the guy is not favorite either. I got some rivalry things with the Warriors too, but
he's that humble brag guy.
Oh,
he's not going to give it out to you in your face.
He's that fake.
He's going to kind of humble brag and let you kind of do it for him almost, which I love. And he's like that sly sarcastic about it, So I love everything about Steph. So maybe I'm being biased here in this situation, obviously.
The character flaws on this podcast are stacking up.
But so that is why I lean, and I'm not trying to take away anything from LeBron because
I have no opinion.
He is arguably, like you said, and it's a great point. You talk about LeBron as is he the best player ever, while you're talking a lot about Steph is he in the top 10? And that could easily end the argument there.
Mm-hmm.
But
we decided
I just like what Steph. I just like what Steph did in that perspective. So I think in that regard, when you break it down to its bare bones, and if we really probably pulled people and really started really talking about it, we would find out it almost comes down to that how LeBron did it versus how Steph did it at its base, rather than the stats or how they led their teams. More of a, do you prefer the homegrown, or do you prefer somebody to just win regardless of how they're winning, if they're building it or not?
So here's the thing, though. Every argument you just made about Steph combining with Durant would then just be applied to LeBron's Miami era.
LeBron never took a back seat in any situation.
But neither did Steph. That's what I'm saying.
Dude, he did, though.
They both just brought in better supporting cast. They did it in different ways because of a cap spike that the NBA players stupidly did not smooth out.
So throughout a season, Steph definitely got his numbers, right? But when it came down to the finals, there was an obvious 1A situation where Durant was going to get the look first. He was going to get the ball first.
So your argument is that Steph deferred because there was a better player from his era on his team?
I don't think Durant's a better player. If you want to say that, fine.
He's a less accomplished
better player.
He's a less accomplished. I think that he's a better player.
See, and look, and I understand exactly the nuance of your argument there. So I have it all the time, and people get mad because they don't. I think Steph is a better player. I think Durant is really good. I'm not trying to take anything away from what he can do at 7 feet and his scoring acumen and everything else. I do think, though, Steph is a better player, talent-wise. So even in that argument, I still think Curry deferred to somebody who he thought could help them win because people couldn't leave him open. And he knew that, so he was willing to be that. I don't think Durant would be that guy. I think if you switch those roles, I don't think Durant would be willing to be a backseat option to somebody because he knew he would take the heat off of the other guy like Curry did for Durant. And I know a little nitpicky, if you will, but I think that's part of what makes Curry so special. I don't think there's very many people who would do that.
Pinky, you look like you have a very interesting take on this. So,
well, I want to shut Caleb up for a moment.
Your facial expressions change throughout this whole thing.
I want to ask Greg.
He's over here flexing.
Yeah, he's like,
oh, showing my Nuggets tattoo. Like, let's go. Greg, how bad is the NBA draft?
This upcoming one?
No, just like in general.
How random are we going to go all of a sudden left field?
No,
cool.
No, I was looking at the 09 draft where Steph Curry was drafted. And I'm looking at the players drafted before him. It's really bad.
Percentage-wise, you could say the same thing about the NFL. Like, that's a silly Pinky. Come on now, you're better.
There's a lot more players drafted in the NFL, so I'm going to give them a little bit of leeway there.
But the hit rate in the first round in the NBA is just as good, if not way better, than the NFL.
Yeah, dude, that's a silly comment. There's more guys, so of course you're going to get more hits. But percentages-wise, it's all as atrocious.
I'll find out. I'll ask Google Gemini. It'll tell me.
Oh, my God. Do it right now so that we can hear you say it.
The computer will never steer you wrong, Pinky.
I mean, I'll do it.
The internet doesn't lie.
Does anybody want to hear
He's just bowing down to his new robot overlords.
Anybody want to hear who was drafted before Steph Curry?
We know.
Oh, I know. I'm a Kings fan.
Know? Yeah, dude, we know. Johnny Flynn went for a back-to-back pick with the Timberwolves. We know.
I don't know. So
Tyreek Evans, Hasheem the Beat.
Now, side note, Tyreek Evans, if he could have got his head on straight, talent for days.
So,
as you know,
his career was derailed by plantar fasciitis. That he
injuries didn't help, but he never truly got his head on to the point where he took it as seriously as he needed to.
I mean, but he had developed into a nice complementary role player before his suspension.
Yes, I fully agree. But that dude should have been all NBA second team minimum on a regular basis. Like, what he could do on a court was crazy. I was a big Tyreek Evans guy.
Yeah, he got hurt. He never fully recovered. He put on some weight. Like, his game was never as explosive after the injury. The explosiveness, though, I mean, it was on par with like young Derrick Rose, like at the his rookie season. Like, he could just get.
There were definitely some flashes of that, no doubt.
Yeah.
Pinky's muted so he can go through this because he doesn't believe people who actually watch basketball.
Hey, I appreciate it because I don't know shit. So.
Greg, let's move into a little bit more current, less
let's go ahead and let's
current events,
less ranking of things that don't have true basis other than people's eyesight's opinion. This season right now, obviously we're a little bit over halfway through the season. All-Star break is always just after that point. You're starting to get a feel for how things are going to unfold, where teams are going to start lining up. You're starting to get a real feel for what the playoff picture is potentially going to look like. What would you say are the biggest stories, surprises, things that caught you as interesting from the first half? And then what are you most looking forward to going into the or not even looking forward to? What are you keeping an eye on going into the second half of the season? We'll start there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, just kind of starting with the East Coast because there's less to talk about there and probably less interest for most folks listening to this. But, the Celtics have been dominant this year. The Drew Holiday trade, the Porzingis trade, both have worked out really well. They are the clear-cut favorite in the East right now. The Cavs have been playing well. The Knicks have been playing really well, and I'm excited to see what they can keep doing. The Bucks have been struggling, and I don't think Doc Rivers was a good hire. And so I don't have high hopes for them the rest of the way. And then after that, it's a bunch of also-rans. I mean, Embiid getting hurt was pretty devastating to the Sixers, so they're unlikely to make a lot of noise this year, which is unfortunate. But then when we switch over to the West, I mean, there's so much going on there. I mean, the West is an absolute bloodbath as far as how competitive it is. You know, the Timberwolves and Thunder were the big surprises early in the season with how they jumped out and are currently 1-2 in the Western Conference. You know, teams that really took a big leap from where they were last season. There's a question of how that's going to hold up and down the home stretch, and especially once you get into playoffs, like teams that haven't been there that much tend to struggle, or in those early round series. So I don't think that anyone's afraid of them, even if they're a 1 or 2 seed. Teams like the Clippers, the Nuggets, the Suns that are full of guys that have been there and done that, especially the Nuggets with their continuity. They don't have the bench depth and bench strength that they used to, which is just kind of an unfortunate side effect of winning the title is it's hard to keep all your guys together. It's a small price to pay, but it's the reality of the challenge of repeating. But there's some really solid teams with some solid veterans. And then you've got a real mess. I mean, Phoenix is kind of in that mess right now. They're the 5th seed. They're at the top of the mess, which includes, the Suns, the Pelicans, the Mavericks, the Kings, and the Lakers and Warriors kind of coming up from behind. But all of those teams could easily win a first round series. Like this year in the West, seeding is going to be just really not as, it'll be important for home court. Obviously there's an advantage there, but like if the Thunder lost to the Mavericks in a series, is anyone going to be that surprised? If the Lakers sneak in through the play-in again, or the Warriors do, and then they win a first round series over the Thunder or the Timberwolves, is anyone going to be that surprised? Probably not. Like there's just a stacked, like top to bottom ranking of like 10 really good teams in the West. And down the stretch, most of those teams play each other a lot. So the standings are going to be all over the place over the last 30 games or so. It's going to be really interesting to watch. I don't know how it's going to shake out. I don't know who's going to end up where, because I mentioned the Thunder and the Timberwolves are at the top. Timberwolves are a game and a half over the Thunder. Thunder are 2 games over the Clippers. Like, I mean, it's all really, really close. The top 4 has a little bit of a gap over the rest of the West, but it's going to be wide open down the stretch.
Solid. Cheers, my guy. Didn't think we'd come out here and agree initially on the basis.
I enjoy watching the Thunder play.
The baseline of what we're talking about, I was surprised. I didn't think we necessarily agree about all of that, but I'm right there with you. I think the Celtics obviously clear cut in the East. Every move they made was brilliant if it played out the way they wanted it to, and it has.
There were risks, and those risks have worked. So
yeah, Porzingis staying healthy, Drew Holiday and the continuity with Brown and Tatum. I'm a huge Holiday fan, so I thought his defensive prowess, that you're replacing him with, or you're replacing Smart with him. You didn't lose anything there, but I like his offensive game more. It was just whether or not he was going to be able to fit in with Tatum and Brown, which he's worked out perfectly as well. Mm-hmm. Tatum, in my personal opinion, and I know I've said this to you in the past, you didn't agree because of his age, but I always looked at the number of years in the league. He was the most inconsistent superstar in the league. So still said he was a superstar. I just thought he was the most inconsistent. I think his finals appearance, unfortunately, kind of proved that, for me at least. But this year, he's been the opposite. He's been almost a model of consistency. I think he's having his greatest year in the NBA. He's truly separated himself, in my opinion, from Brown. I don't think it's a pick or choose your adventure guy anymore. I think it is Tatum's team. So I think that has a lot to do with where the Celtics are at this year. I think personally they are the biggest threat to the Nuggets repeating. I love what Cleveland's doing. I don't know if they can keep it all together. It is still a pretty young team. Can they keep Donovan Mitchell in Cleveland? There's some questions there, but they're on like a 16 out of 18 game streak or something right now.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, so I like the young talent they have. I think they can make some noise. Dark horse Eastern Conference Finals kind of thing. You're right. Embiid's out for the season. I said that as soon as the injury happened. I know the Sixers are trying to say he could be back. There's no way.
Fan service.
there's not, with that injury, with his history, there's no way he plays again this season. The Sixers are done. I think Milwaukee is the biggest threat, obviously, to Boston in the East, but can they figure it out? Dame Dalla, Giannis,
the
other
Bucks
pieces.
record since they fired their coach
2-7.
is the same as the Pistons.
Yeah, it's not good.
Pretty bad.
I think hiring Doc Rivers was a mistake. I've always said he's wildly underrated. No team has lived off one championship more than the 09 Celtics.
Yeah.
They have milked that for more than was even in the bottle still somehow. It's baffling to me. But what's interesting to me about Milwaukee is I think they're the exact same team. And the reason I say this is because what they lost in defense by allowing Holiday to walk, they made up for in offense by bringing on Damian Lillard. So while they're different, their middle or their average or whatever you want to call it, I think is still the exact same. It's just on different ends of that scale now. Can they finally get cohesive enough and put it all together to keep up with the Celtics? Because I still feel like they can play equal defense as the Celtics. I feel like if they finally find that continuity, they can score with the Celtics. It's just whether or not they'll find that with Doc Rivers, who I think is a wildly overrated coach and has problems when it comes to crunch time in the playoffs.
Robert,
So
are you taking notes? Should
What?
be taking notes.
I'm just listening. I'm just taking it all in.
So it'll be interesting to me to see how that works out with Milwaukee. But Greg, you're right. It's the Celtics, regardless of what Milwaukee figures out to me. Do the Celtics shoot themselves in the foot, or do they keep rolling, in which case they're in the NBA Finals? Out West, I do believe it's the Nuggets to lose. I feel like they're coasting a little bit through the regular season, and they will be able to turn it on come playoffs as long as they're healthy. Health is still a big concern with that team when you talk about Jamal Murray and some of the bench. Contavious Caldwell-Pope being a big piece of that.
Obviously,
I think while the bench isn't as strong as it was last year, I think last year's team didn't find the bench continuity until later in the season, really after All-Star break. So the Nuggets still have some of that potential. Can Brown take another growth spurt? Peyton Watson's looked pretty solid. Does he finally have the trust of Malone in the playoffs to play the minutes that will be required in the playoffs if guys get in foul trouble or things of that nature? Still to be determined. I think the biggest threat to the Nuggets out west is going to be the Clippers. Because if the Clippers are healthy, the talent level on that team is just undeniable. I think, like you said, and I love your examples, the Thunder and the Timberwolves, they're unproven and young. Now, the Nuggets said flat out, the Timberwolves gave the Nuggets their biggest challenge of the playoffs, and that was pretty obvious.
Mm-hmm.
So they can take another step and still lose to the Nuggets in 6 or 7, right? Just because of that lack of experience when it really matters. They are the most, shall we say, exciting and interesting two teams out west, Minnesota and the Thunder, to see what they can do and what kind of noise they can make. I think Golden State is one of the most interesting because with the change to the starting lineup and bringing Kuminga into more of that role, moving Klay to the bench, being willing to adjust on the fly and kind of change some of these things, Steph is still insane, and he's proved that.
Yeah.
If Draymond can kind of find his groove again but keep his head a little bit cooler, the Warriors still have some pieces to make some noise in the West too, as do the Lakers. It's the same team that went to the Western Conference Finals last year. So while I say the Nuggets are still, to me, the clear-cut favorite, I don't think their path would be nearly as easy as it was last year, if you will. And when I say easy, I mean they just dominated and walked through people because they were just rolling. Mm-hmm. Not easy because the teams were bad. So that's kind of where I stand on everything there.
I think the Nuggets, I think any NBA pundit would still put the Nuggets as the favorite to come out of the West. I mean, their top 5, and again, health is the concern, right? But their top 5, if it's Jokic, Murray, Gordon, KCP, and MPJ, like that top 5 is phenomenal. Like that is an excellent top 5. The problem really becomes when you get past that. Like even if you assume playoffs, you're looking at tighter rotations, right? Like an 8-man rotation. I mean, right now, if we look at their guys who lead in minutes, like 6, 7, 8 is Reggie Jackson, Christian Brown, and Peyton Watson. And then, you figure maybe some minutes in there for like DeAndre Jordan or Zignaji for, big man depth. That's not great bench. That's not good. Like
it's tough. I mean, like the
you're really relying.
Potential is there, obviously.
Yeah.
And anybody who watches the NBA knows that.
Yeah.
But again, that consistency, the experience, you're absolutely right. It's a big question mark still.
Now, Reggie Jackson has had some huge playoff moments already in his career. You go back to his time in the Clippers. He is that guy who's an absolute microwave, and if he is having a game, he can carry. Like he can be fantastic. Christian Brown, I'm a big fan of. It's just tough to rely on him in that bigger role. And same with Peyton Watson, just so young. And
to take it a step further, Greg, when you talk about Reggie, come playoff time, in all honesty, he's not really in that 8-man rotation because that means you're taking away minutes from Brown, who's going to flip between that guard and small forward position, and KCP and Murray. So really getting Reggie consistent minutes for him to have a huge impact, that'd have to be a very situational game thing where you just he's hot and you're letting him roll, and you might leave Jamal or KCP on the bench because of it for stretches. So I agree. He's kind of the most veteran guy there, but based on his position, that's where it kind of hamstrings them a little bit as him being part of that 8-man rotation because of the guard depth you have and maybe lack of front court depth, like you just mentioned. Because when you're talking about Zeke Naji coming in to fill some of those minutes, that's kind of unfortunate for the Nuggets.
I mean, personally, I'd give Reggie Jackson the minutes over Brown, and I'm a fan of Brown, but I mean, you can just look at the numbers, and Reggie Jackson's been better this year. Like
I wouldn't hate that at all. I don't know,
and he has that experience.
If Malone would do that though,
sure.
And the only reason I say Malone might not do that is because come playoff time, what Malone's looking for from the bench is more defensive prowess than it is offensive prowess.
Which Brown and Watson are pretty good on the defensive side. It's the offense, which again they're usually in when Joker's not in.
Inconsistency, yeah, unfortunately. But again, Pinky and I've said this before. Defense literally at its base is just effort. And I'm not knocking Reggie and saying he's bad effort on the defensive end. He puts it in, maybe not as much as he could, but he puts it in. But he's also a guy who is going to give you more on the offensive end. And that takes away some energy, which takes away being able to do it on the defense, where Watson and Brown, they're really putting that effort in on the defensive end, not as much on the offensive end, which if you watch them play, you can see that in some of the things they go to do with shot selection and stuff on the offensive end because their legs really aren't there.
I mean, you can watch.
That's just the fact that they put so much effort and stamina on the defensive end that they went to go do a shot or a layup or a dunk, and their legs aren't there for it. And so it's just kind of a difference of game.
Reggie's definitely in the 8-man rotation. He's been heavily in the rotation all year this year.
Don't be surprised if come playoff time he isn't. Regular season rotation and playoff rotation can be very different at times.
He's basically taking when Jamal's not on the floor, Reggie's on the floor.
A lot of his minutes this year were when Jamal was injured too, or out. So keep that in mind.
More minutes. He's definitely taken on more minutes when Jamal's been out.
But to Pinky's point, who's their backup point guard if it's not Reggie Jackson?
Oh, they don't have one.
Right. You're just running Jokic, right? Like,
and that's kind of the thing is when you get into playoff time, you don't necessarily start using that 7th or 8th guy the same way you did regular season. You start staggering Jokic and Murray more, and things of that nature. So you start seeing backup point guards or your 7th or 8th guy rotation off the bench. All of a sudden, they're not playing the same minutes they do in the playoffs. That's where the NBA and your casual fan may not understand why it changed so much. Well, it changed so much because you're not trying to give those guys the same rest that you did during the regular season on a back-to-back cross-country flight game kind of thing.
In the playoffs, again, Murray and Joker are playing 40 minutes a game or more.
Which is why you may not see Reggie see as many. Now, if he's playing really well and Malone really wants to try to get him some minutes, you could very much see him splitting minutes with KCP at the shooting guard. That wouldn't surprise me at all. But you will not see him taking as much of Murray's minutes because, like Greg just said, Jokic can play that point. So those lineups, especially depending on matchups, start looking very different. So we'll see what that looks like.
Oh. Caleb, I will bet you a 6-pack that Reggie Jackson is top 7 in playoff minutes per game for the Nuggets this year.
Ooh, a 6-pack.
High stakes. I'm a big gambler, so
I like this though. Top 7.
Top 7. I feel like that's a pretty good line to draw it at, right? Because
that's a great. If you would have said 8, I'd have said hell no.
Yeah.
7 though makes it very interesting. Tell you what, give me. I'll get with you through back channels after this, but you got my wheels spinning, man, and I'm leaning towards it. So we'll see what happens.
Coward, it's a 6-pack.
No, are you not so much. It's the 7 is.
Come on, McFly.
Let's do it. I'm in. Cheers, my guy. I'm in.
It happened here, ladies and gentlemen. It happened here.
I'm in. 7 is an interesting. I like it. I say no. You say yes. Let's see what happens.
All right.
Now, here's the thing, though. I say all this about the Nuggets, and we went a little in depth. Obviously, we're homers, blah, blah, blah.
Of course.
But they are defending champions. I think they deserve their due diligence to discuss why they're a top dog. The Clippers, to me, are very interesting because of what they have. If you have a healthy Kawhi and a healthy PG, I think you're insanely dangerous. You throw in Harden, Westbrook coming off the bench, some of their other pieces that they have with Zubac and whatnot to fill in, they become very interesting. Where I think they fall just short of the Nuggets is cohesiveness come playoff time. Now, they've shown a lot of it in the regular season. Harden's looked like he changed his role. He understands he's the third option. Westbrook being the ultimate teammate, which I've always appreciated from him, regardless if I think he's one of the top point guards all the time because of some of his decision-making on the court, if you will. I still think he's the ultimate teammate, willing to come off the bench, provides that spark for that second unit. They don't necessarily have somebody that can match up against a Jokic. What they do have, though, is 2 of the top perimeter defenders in the game right now to take away Murray, and it can really create some havoc on the Nuggets pick and roll. The Nuggets can counter with Gordon shutting down whoever their top scorer is of the night or their hot guy. KCP can play some solid defense as well. I think that becomes a really interesting chess match back and forth where I think the Nuggets' cohesiveness and playing an overall more team-oriented ball, if you will, would give them just the ever so slightest of edges in a 7 game, a 7th game series of a 7-game series. I think it goes 7. I would just give the Nuggets the slightest of edges because of that overall team mentality, moving the ball. Everybody can be the guy that night kind of thing, where I think the Clippers would still kind of find a way to try and force one of the top guys, even if it wasn't his night.
The tricky part with the Clippers is that their team motto has been for the past 5 years, if the Clippers are healthy.
Yeah.
Like, if they're healthy, absolutely. But they've already had a lot better injury luck than most of the past years. They've played 53 games this year. Now, Russ has played all 53 because Russ doesn't miss time. He is not part of the problem.
Hasn't Kawhi played 48 out of the 53?
Paul George has played 50. Harden and Kawhi have both played 48.
Yeah.
Terrence Mann's 47. Zubac's 43. But they're big names who are the injury-prone guys have barely missed anything. And I really wonder 2 parts. One, can they get through the remaining portion of their schedule, the remaining 29 games, without any injuries? And can they get through the intensity of playoff series without any injuries? Because historically speaking, those guys haven't. And if they're hurt, that team's, they've got a lot of vets, but they've got a lot of older vets who can't do stuff. Like,
I'll be honest, I'm not scared of the Clippers. I'm scared of two teams. And it's two teams we've not played well.
The Kings.
The Kings.
Yeah.
Played horrible against the Kings. That could be just making the Kings feel good about themselves. I don't know, just kind of a hustle. And the Thunder. They've not played good against those two teams. Those are the two teams I'm worried about. They've played great against most of the East teams. All the top East teams they've played great against. The Kings and the Thunder are the two teams the Nuggets have not played well against. Those are the two teams I'm worried about. The Clippers, we beat the Clippers with their top five, with Joker, Jamal, and MPJ all out.
Regular season, postseason, two very different stories, Pinky. I know Greg's a big Kings guy, and Greg, I apologize ahead of time with this because it's going to sound terrible, and I apologize. I've loved the Kings. You and I have talked about it since the C-Web, white chocolate days. So we're very much in tune there. The Kings, when it comes playoff time, 7-game series kind of stuff, Pinky, they have deficiencies in my mind. Keegan Murray.
Hold on real quick.
Go ahead.
So this is going to be a quiz on how much you've actually watched the Kings this year. Because what do you think those deficiencies are? So,
I'm high level stuff right now. It'll be a little bit high level.
Fact check.
I'm not going to go into a ton of depth because I will be honest.
No, you're good. You're good.
I have not watched as much as I want to, so I'm not going to lie about any of that. But this is where I believe the Kings' deficiencies lie when it comes to playoff 7-game series, beating a team 4 out of 7. Keegan Murray hasn't quite taken that next step that the Kings were hoping to.
Man.
Keep going.
I was expecting to hear a lot more conversation of all-star status from him this year.
From a second-year player in the West?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying he should have been an all-star.
In the West.
I'm not saying he should have been an all-star.
I'm
just saying I expected to see.
Sabonis and Fox got snubbed. We're thinking Keegan should have been there?
I laid out why Sabonis and Fox got snubbed.
Yeah.
Now
I know.
Keep in mind the All-Star game is more like the Pro Bowl than it is the All-NBA teams, and I see those as being two very separate things.
Yeah. Keep going. I didn't mean to derail. I just had to cackle at that one.
Look, I personally don't think Keegan Murray has taken the step that was expected that the Kings need. And I'm not saying he won't get there. I'm saying for them to be competitive this year, to be a true championship contender, he hasn't taken as big as a step as needed as what I think he needs to be the true second option to Fox. Maybe even the first option and letting Fox be the second. But that needs time. Like you said, he's in his second year as a player. So not necessarily expecting that, just saying for them to be the top dog, these are the scenarios I see would need to happen for them to beat the Nuggets or the Clippers or maybe even the Timberwolves, who might be slightly ahead of them where you look at their stars compared to the Kings stars. I think Fox is a stud. I love De'Aaron Fox. I have since he came out of Kentucky. He's done nothing but improve year in and year out. His game is just sick. Sabonis to me is the big what if question mark guy that I think if they truly dominate is the key to it. And what I think he needs to develop in his game is a true offensive skill set to where if Fox is struggling for the night or Keegan Murray is struggling for the night, he could help carry a game by creating some of his own offense. From 15 feet and in, he's dangerous. His fundamentals, his footwork, everything that goes along with his little baby hook and everything. 15 feet and in, dangerous. 15 feet and out, his game is almost non-existent on the offensive end. I mean, say what you want. That's just what I'm seeing from him. And so because of that, it creates a situation where he doesn't become something that's feared when Murray and Fox aren't hitting from the outside. And so if he's having a good game, it's not something where he's going to draw people away from the basket and be able to create some of those driving lanes for those guys to get some of those easy looks. So it keeps them back just a step behind what I'm seeing from the Timberwolves this year, because Anthony Edwards has been able to take what I see as that next step. Now, he's got a couple more years in the league than Keegan Murray. Keegan Murray's got the skill set to still be able to do that. He's just not there yet. Anthony Edwards is. So their timeline is just a couple years ahead of the Kings. I still think Sabonis will develop too. So don't get me wrong. When I say his 15 feet and out isn't necessarily there, I still think he'll develop it, especially knowing his dad. But I think the Wolves are a little bit ahead when you look at Karl Anthony Towns and you look at what Anthony Edwards and then those pieces they have around him. But some of the questions about the Wolves is their health as well. So, again, haven't gotten to watch a lot of the Kings games in depth like Greg has. That's more just kind of what I see from the outside.
Kings analyst?
What?
You mean you haven't watched as many games as a Kings analyst has?
Yeah, go figure. Also a little bit harder to watch them unless you have specific packages, which I don't necessarily have
awesome
that.
And have NBA TV like Greg?
I do have NBA TV, so I do get to see them play. I like Keegan Murray. I was actually a big fan of his coming out of college. So, and like I said, I like De'Aaron Fox. I love Sabonis. His dad, I think, didn't get his due because he came in the league too late. So I love all their core pieces. So I try to watch them when I can. I'm talking, and again, it's nitpicking, if you will, but I'm talking what I think is going to keep them from being able to go to the ultimate level because of what's ahead of them and what I believe is holding them back from taking that next step.
All right, let's let Greg talk now.
So
it's Greg's turn.
I'll start by saying
a few more minutes on this, and then we'll wrap it up.
And I'll start by saying I have no illusions that the Kings are a championship contender. I don't think that they are this year, and I don't think that they, whatever they might have said preseason, I don't think realistically they thought they were going into the year either. This is the year before the year, right? They're going to try to make the big push and the big step forward into contender status next season. But just kind of looking at the things that you mentioned. So Keegan Murray has improved in almost every way, except for his 3-point shooting has regressed a little bit. And some of that's because he is no longer just taking spot-ups. He has developed his game to where he is now attacking off the dribble. He is penetrating the paint. He's increased his 2-point field goal attempts significantly to where he is a far more 3-dimensional scoring threat. And he's done that while, despite his 3-point shooting going down, his effective field goal percentage is, still very strong. His overall shooting percentage has gone up. He is, creating more off the dribble. He is playing, world's better defense. Keegan Murray right now is a top 10 wing defender in the NBA, which is a massive leap from where he was last year, a massive leap from where anyone projected him in college. So although it may not all show up, because he's only averaging an extra kind of 2 points per game more, his impact on the game has become so much bigger. And, pivoting to the concerns about Sabonis, he doesn't take a lot of them. He's averaging just over 1 a game, but he's currently shooting over 42% from 3. He worked a lot on shooting, and especially the above the break 3 straight on. He's shooting 55% on those. Not at enough of a volume to make defenses respect it all the time, but enough that if they leave him alone, he's going to punish them. And his overall game, he's been shooting a lot more of those free throw line jumpers that were being left wide open against Golden State in the playoffs last year and that really got exploited. He made that a focus too. He hits those on a regular basis now. He's also leading the league in rebounds again. He's currently leading the league in triple doubles. He has a current streak of about 30 double-doubles in a row. So Sabonis has taken a huge step forward in what he's doing this year, just on all sides of the ball. I mean, his defense, much in the way that Jokic's defense was kind of undersold for a lot of years, I feel like Sabonis is too. He's not an elite defender. He's not a shot blocking big man. He doesn't make the big highlight plays, but he plays solid defense. He really had, I was at that game on Valentine's Day up in Denver. He had Sabonis flustered. Jokic was trying to take over down the stretch, and Sabonis was playing disciplined, smart defense on him. He wasn't leaving his feet. He was staying straight up. And Jokic was getting really pissed he wasn't getting calls, but like the defense was
He never gets
solid.
calls.
I mean, neither do the Kings. Like it's kind of like, you know, immovable force and, you know, unstoppable object.
The problem is when you play fundamental, solid basketball and are really good at the same time with all these extra skills, the refs in the NBA don't know what to do with that anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I really think the supporting cast for the Kings is where they're going to fall short. Like Herter's inconsistent. Harrison Barnes is inconsistent.
Nope.
Their bench has been really inconsistent. I mean, Malik Monk should be in contention for 6th man of the year, but he has off nights where he does next to nothing. He's great in that 6-man role for that reason. Like he shouldn't be anything more than that 6-man role. And aside from Monk, some nights you get good games from Trey Lyles, and there's not a whole lot else off that bench. So, you know, it's kind of that depth issue, but the top end talent is not on the Nuggets level. So it just kind of, the issue is even worse. Like the Kings will have nights when, you know, Fox and Sabonis combined for like 80 points and they lose the game because no one else scored more than like 4 points.
They beat the Nuggets. That's all I know.
That's a great – I'm glad you said that, Greg, because I see a lot of similarities between the Kings and the Nuggets. And when you talk about the top-end talent not being on that level, look, I said I love the Kings. I truly do. I love these 3 players specifically in Murray, Sabonis, and Fox. So when I said I was nitpicking, I'm truly nitpicking. Like, you almost have to find things to figure out why things aren't going the way maybe you necessarily thought. And really, if you compare them to the Nuggets, they are still a couple years away from taking that next step. And it really is just truly the players growing into and learning the NBA game and their skill level and their potential and everything else. Because when I say Murray hasn't developed into what they thought he would, I don't mean it this immediate moment. I mean, again, to be a championship team, no different than Murray or MPJ, depending on how you want to look at that, with the Nuggets growing into their roles and realizing what their potential can be alongside a great player. So they have, just by the eye test, the potential to win one. Whether or not that potential becomes the fruition of that ultimate level is still yet to be seen. And again, even looking at the Nuggets comparison, I think the Nuggets are the new iteration of what the Warriors were in that homegrown, building from the ground up, whatever you want to talk about it, and then finding just those right free agent pieces to put around it. That's really what the Kings are. Their next step is their guys just continuing to grow in the direction they're going and then finding those right key free agent pieces. And not every team, unfortunately, throughout history is able to find those right key free agent pieces to put around those stars to make it all work at the right time. The Nuggets did, and they have the potential to repeat and do something special going forward. Are the Kings able to do that? Can they interrupt the Nuggets and what they're trying to do? Do the Clippers? You know, there's some things here that I agree. The West has so many storylines going into the playoffs where the East doesn't really, that it's going to be fun to watch and see how it unfolds. I mean, for God's sake, the Kings' potential have arguably the ability to come out of the West, but they're 5th in the standings.
The Kings? No, the Kings are currently
8th. 8th? Weren't they just 5th? I thought going into
but it's like break? A game that separates everyone. It changes every day.
That's the thing. Okay, my bad. I missed the last game before going into All-Star breaks, and it changed everything. But they're right there. You know what I mean? So, are they going to upset the Nuggets or maybe the Clippers? Maybe they're not quite there.
I don't want the Nuggets to play the Kings in the first round. I'll say that right now.
Just to kind of cap off your point, I agree. I think the Kings are kind of where the Nuggets were before they pulled off the Aaron Gordon trade. Like that's the type of move that the Kings are needing to make. You know, they try to find stuff at the deadline. They're going to try it again in the offseason. Like you can't always pull it off, but that's the type of move that kind of puts a team over the top into that next level of contention. And that's what they're looking for right now.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Greg, what is your, how do I want to word this? What do you think is the one thing that will surprise people for the second half of the season going into the playoffs? East, West, anything, any storyline. What do you think will kind of it's kind of already sitting there, but it'll sneak up on people possibly and be a big story come playoffs or the end of the season. Do you think there's that dark horse kind of scenario in any regards as we move into the second half?
Trying to think of like my most hot take thing that I've got. I think we're going to see, just playing the numbers, playing the odds, playing the likelihoods, I think that injuries are going to really disrupt the Western Conference standings in a way that people aren't counting on right now. Like most of the West has been extraordinarily healthy. Clippers, Thunder, Timberwolves, Suns, with the exception of some missed games from Beal, Pelicans, Mavericks outside of Kyrie. Kyrie missed a chunk of the season. Kings haven't had a lot of injuries. Like the stars in the league, especially in the West, have not missed much time. And a lot of those stars are older and have put on a lot more miles than they're used to because they're trying to hit that 65 game threshold for all NBA, for, end of season awards. And I feel like we could start to see some of the wheels come off right as we get into the playoffs and could really wreak havoc with how things end up going right leading into the playoff standings and in the first round of the playoffs.
Oh man,
Greg, what are your thoughts on the Lakers?
I hope that they're one of those teams. No, I don't wish injuries on any specific people. Like I don't want bad karma or anything like that. No, I think the Lakers, I will be surprised.
All things equal, everybody stays healthy. What do you see them doing?
I'll be surprised if the Lakers are in the first round. I think they'll be in the play-in.
And
I'll be surprised if they're in the first round.
Remind me, I was talking with Robert about this earlier. Remind me, how does the play-in work?
So I actually just had to get corrected on this because I wrote an article and got it wrong initially and had to correct it.
Come on, Greg. I expect better from you, sir.
My team was the 3rd seed, and other than that, we haven't been around the play-in at all. So in the event of the play-in, the 7th seed and the 8th seed play each other. Winner is automatically in the playoffs as the 7th seed. At the same time, the 9 and 10 seed play each other. The loser is out. The loser of the 7-8 game plays the winner of the 9-10 game, and that team, whoever wins that, is the 8th seed.
I was right. That's what I told Robert.
You asked that question just to see if you were right about something
Absolutely.
you said to somebody who wasn't even arguing with you?
Hey, at least he asked me instead of a computer.
Hey, listen, I'm trying to get education. Pinky was wanted to make sure he was providing accurate information.
Why are you asking Pinky about basketball in the first place?
Because
now I gotta start questioning your acumen for.
I don't work on the same floor as Greg, nor do I have that level of relationship with Greg, nor do I know the questions I need to be asking. So I'm just going with it, and I do have a singular question, and it is a absolutely useless fucking question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What the hell is a field goal in basketball? I have never been able to understand that, and I would very much like to know.
It is a shot you take from the floor that is not a free throw.
Any shot. Any shot. It does not matter.
3-pointer, 2-pointer, dunk, layup, any shot. That's a field goal.
I have no basketball knowledge, so that is something I've been very curious about. So now I know.
Field goal percentage is your overall shooting from anywhere on the court. Then you have your 2-point shooting field goal percentage, your 3-point shooting field goal percentage, your now true shooting percentage.
Effective field goal percentage.
Thank you. There's going to be quite a few. Your offensive efficiency.
I'm learning this very, very slowly, and I'm like,
there's a lot of analytics in basketball that people don't understand how deep it truly goes, and Greg and I could probably nerd out on just that alone. But anybody else have any final thoughts on what they think might be interesting for the second half of the NBA season?
I'm interested in the Thunder. Right now, I think Shea is the next to Joker is the next guy for the MVP. Night in and night out, he's been pretty awesome.
Can I just say I'm also a Shea hater? Like, I think he's an amazing player, and I actually really love watching him play, but I also feel like he's overrated and oddly anointed by the media.
He's not overrated like Trae Young overrated, though, right? We can agree on that.
Let me ask you this, Greg. Do you hate Luka?
No, I mean, I hate Luka's whining, but I think he's a phenomenal player, and I really wish the Kings had taken him. I advocated for him big time back in the Marvin Bagley
Yeah,
day.
let's not go down that road.
Yeah.
Like the amount of teams that didn't, like, that's just ridiculous. But aside from that, I think I am actually surprised because the more I watch Shea, the more I see some very real similarities between him and Luka's game. Shea's not the most athletic guy. He is athletic, but he's not the most. He's actually a little bit more athletic version of Luka, but he plays below the rim a lot more than I think people realize, and he's just really efficient. So I am a little surprised to hear you say you're not a big fan of his.
I just like the Thunder as a whole. I enjoy watching them play.
Look, Giddey's playing down really bad this year. He's drastically underachieving from what they need him to be and what they expected him to be this year. And I think that's going to be a huge thing that holds them back from making. I could see them getting out of the first round because they don't quite have the supporting cast around Shea that they need. Chet's a great piece, and I think he's going to be really good and continue to improve for many years. But again, this is his rookie year.
Greg,
the Williams twins are really good, but they're not great. They're really good. I think they truly expected Giddey to take a step towards greatness this year, and he's actually regressed from good to really good to average at
Didn't
best.
He have that,
unfortunately,
didn't he have that underage sexual assault charge on him? Or
that all got cleared, dismissed. It's not
but
hanging over his head anymore.
It was there.
Right, but there's no.
The team then had an event at a high school that they did not invite him to. Like there's something there. Like,
yeah, he's not. Regardless of what went on, he's still not showing up on the court. He's playing worse this year than he did last year. So when you expect a guy to take a jump forward, and instead of staying the same, he takes a jump back, it's going to be an issue for you come that 7-game series playoff time.
All right. I think we've talked a good amount of NBA.
Yes, I was about to say we got our final thoughts in.
Greg, can you come back once playoffs start, right before playoffs, and we'll break down East West and see what we're feeling? Would that be something you could get on board with?
Absolutely. I'd love to bore Pinky and Robert to death again.
We can have an NBA pop quiz. Hey, I'm gonna come prepared next time. I'm gonna have names and stats and shit. I'll be ready.
Look, the depths with Greg and I could go and just nerding out on some basketball the way Pinky always wants to do the football, which I appreciate too.
Hold on. I've grown a lot in these last 3 years.
Pinky, I'm not trying to downgrade you, my guy. You have leaps and bounds on your basketball abilities. By all means. Just saying, Greg and I could be talking about PERS right now, and you guys would lose your marbles. So,
All right. I would be remiss if we don't talk a little bit about the NFL with one of my favorite 49er fans, Greg, and what happened at that Super Bowl. Greg and I talked a little bit about it today. So
Greg, I already know where you're going, and let's just get it out in the open right now. They lost because they didn't start Sam Darnold.
I was gonna try to ease it in.
Yeah.
You want to go right in?
Yeah, because I already know what's coming, so let's just throw it out there. That's why they lost.
There you go.
Let's just put it in the open.
We all were thinking it. You just had the stones to say it. No, I mean, I was talking with Pinky earlier today, and it's always tough when your team falls short in the Super Bowl, right? Like that's never going to be easy. You Broncos fans know that so well.
Absolutely. But to be fair, the Broncos have always gotten blown out in Super Bowls. So there's not really like if we did this, we would have won. Like we just got blown out.
And the biggest thing is there's so many little things that you could point to that like, if this went different, if this went different, if this went different, like there's so many things that Niners fans can look at and, the special teams play where the punt hits the guy's foot and the returner doesn't fall on it, tries to scoop it. McCaffrey fumbling on the first drive when they had all that momentum. You kind of go on down the list, a couple key injuries, guys getting banged up, missing a couple series. There's so many little things that you can point to that if any one of those things go different, you win the Super Bowl. And it doesn't make it easier when there's a dozen little things, but in the same sense, at least there's not just one thing. It's not like there was like one missed play on the final score where the ref missed an obvious something. Like, there's none of that. There's no bullshit. It's that a lot of little things added up, and the Chiefs played a hell of a game, and it sucks, but sometimes that's the way the ball bounces. It was an overtime, close game, hard fought, had opportunities to stop them, in overtime for the win on 4th down twice. I don't necessarily get hung up on any one thing.
Thoughts on them taking the ball on the overtime coin toss?
So that's where I go back to. I don't get hung up on that as one thing because there's so many other things. Okay, if we even just look at overtime, they take the ball first, they get limited to a field goal. And yes, there is a big advantage. We know from college football, there's a big advantage in having the ball second and knowing what you need. But at the same time, the Niners had them to 4th down twice in overtime. Your defense steps up and gets that stop once. You've won the game. And no one's talking about the fact that you took the ball first. Or if on one of those, you had them stopped at 3rd with enough distance they didn't feel comfortable going for it, they kick a field goal. Now you're sudden death and you have the ball first and no one's second guessing. There's a million ways it can play out. And I get the arguments for taking the ball second. But of all the things I look at in that game, that's pretty far down my list on the things that I care about or pay attention to.
This guy, cheers, bring this guy back. I don't know why I didn't want him ever coming on. Come on, get him over here.
I think you made the best point, Greg. If Dre Greenlaw doesn't go out, we're maybe talking about a different game.
Dre Greenlaw goes out. His replacement is targeted 9 times for 9 catches and a touchdown. Dre Greenlaw's injury on a freak play, and he's running out on the sideline. If it doesn't get hurt there, it's probably the next play anyway. That tendon was about to go apparently, but man, if that tendon could have held on for a couple more hours, that would have been game changing, right? So many different things that could have gone slightly different, and the Niners probably win that, but they didn't. And I have a hard time being upset at such a good game and the breaks of the game just not quite going your way when you had so many opportunities for them to go your way. And there's nothing to do but try to shore up the weaknesses and get better and come back and try again the next year.
That kind of leads me to that question, Greg. What are the Niners? The Niners have been one of the top teams in the NFL for the last three out of 4 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Minus, Garoppolo injury, and you guys were left hanging.
Yeah.
Where do you go from here? When you've been that team, you've been in the NFC Championship 3 out of 4 years, you've been in the Super Bowl 2 times in the last 4 years. How do you get over that hump?
I think the biggest key is the offensive line. Their offensive line was a concern of mine going into the season. They were an issue all year, and they were especially an issue on the Super Bowl. Outside of Trent Williams, who's phenomenal, that offensive line was getting wrecked all day. Purdy was throwing quick routes, and that's a big reason why we didn't see a lot of deep routes to Kittle or Ayuk or the plays that they usually like to run is because he had no time to let those plays develop. And it's a credit that he got as many completions, as much yardage, and did as well as he did under the pressure he was seeing, because the Niners offense is not designed for quick reads and quick outs. They really need to shore up that offensive line. If they can make that a stronger element next season, it makes a huge difference for the run game, for the pass game, for everything. The fact that their offense was as successful as it was with such a a shoddy offensive line throughout the year is really a testament to how good the rest of that team is. But I'd like it to not have to be something they overcome next year. Like, just shore it up. Like, I've seen Niners fans joking, like, use our first 3 draft picks on offensive linemen. I don't care. I will not blink. Like, like just address that weakness.
What about, I know you guys let go of your defensive coordinator, which I know a lot of Niners fans are not sad about. What's the replacement plan there?
That's where it gets that makes me nervous. I mean, I fully supported getting rid of him. I did not think he was a good fit. I was frustrated with the defense all season. He spent most of the season running a really deep, soft zone coverage that was easy to pick apart. And he was just relying on the front four to get pressure. The numbers didn't look that much worse. If you look at the overall stats and numbers for the defense, they didn't look that much different than last year. But if you watch the games, it did not look like the same defense. I mean, they have so much talent and they got so little impact out of it this year compared to what it felt like they got the years before. I think if I was a betting man, not that this would be my top choice, I would guess Brandon Staley seems like a likely pick. And then you're just kind of
rumor that's floating out there already anyways.
And you're just kind of hoping that it's one of those situations where the guy's not a good head coach, but he's a great coordinator like Spagnuolo is for the Chiefs, right? Like that's what you're hoping for. Because he did have an excellent Rams defense that he oversaw before he became a head coach. Like you would hope that that's the situation. I'd be really nervous with that pick.
Although his defenses with the Chargers were always underwhelming.
Right. And that's the thing. Like
more injury related, at least in my opinion, than it was play calling and coaching.
Yeah. But I mean, the way I look at it is this season, Shanahan had to make Wilkes come down and call plays from the sideline so that Shanahan could be more involved and correct things when needed. He had to burn a timeout in the Super Bowl because the defense was lined up so far back, which had been an issue all season long. Like when your offensive guru head coach has to stop things and correct your defensive coordinator, like the guy's got to go. It's just a bad fit. Like
I think it's, and I hear what you're saying and I agree with you. I think really what it comes down to is just philosophy.
Yeah.
It's a philosophical difference where Shanahan is error on the side of being aggressive, where Wilkes errors on the side of that bend but don't break. And what it really comes down to, and I've always believed this, when you're a bend but don't break, you're just really always rolling the dice that you don't break at the wrong time. And unfortunately, the 49ers defense broke at the wrong time in the biggest game, in the biggest situation, last possession of regulation and the last possession of overtime.
We can be honest. If you hold a team again up until, overtime, they held the Chiefs to 19 points. You should win that game. Yeah,
but again, Pinky, it's the offense was kind of being aggressive, but not being aggressive, so on and so forth. Didn't want to lose the game. But when you're bend but don't break, Fangio's the same way. He's notorious for it. And then his teams get beat in the biggest games, in the biggest moments, because they ended up breaking and not bending when you needed them to. And so if that's your philosophy and you break at the wrong time, I know everybody's like, oh, you shouldn't make Steve Wilkes the scapegoat. Well, guess what? Your philosophy didn't work when you needed it to, and it didn't align with what the head coach wanted to do. You're going to end up being the quote-unquote scapegoat.
That defense looked out of sort most of the season.
Greg mentioned it. They had a play where they were lined up so far back for bending but not breaking that the coach burned a timeout. It's just philosophical differences of what you would do in the biggest moments that didn't align. So you can call it scapegoat all you want, but it comes down to the head coach going, look, if that ever happens again, I don't want to have to say our philosophies didn't align. I want to be able to say that we did what we wanted to do and it just didn't work out. He doesn't ever want to have those what ifs in the back of his head going around again, which I feel like Shanahan has a lot of, unfortunately, right now.
And I mean, Shanahan even said, like, he had his initial press conference like the day after and said, like, we're not making any changes. And then he came back like a couple days later saying, hey, we couldn't see eye to eye philosophically. And to me, what that screams is he was willing to stick with Wilkes, but went to him with like, hey, these are the things that we got to change next year. And Wilkes is like, that's not my style. And so they agreed to part ways. Like, that's what it looks like to me.
I agree 100%. No ill will or bad blood or anything like that. And Greg talks about the offensive line. Like, I almost feel like as a fan, he's nitpicking because really, like, if the 49ers aren't snake bitten in their last 2 Super Bowls, shit, you can go back to their last 3 Super Bowl appearances. It almost feels like they're snake bitten. They got a voodoo curse on them or something where that oblong ball that bounces really funny just refuses to bounce in the 49ers way for some reason. So you can nitpick and say, yeah, I want that offensive line to be better. I wish they had blocked Chris Jones a couple of times at the end of the game. Like,
I just wish once.
Yeah, right. Like, so it comes at like there is. I've seen it multiple times now. I've recorded it and watched it and rewound it. Like that punt off the guy's ankle, that's nobody's fault. That is literally just the worst break at the worst time. It's not even he was in bad position. He was trying to push his guy out of the way forward, away from the ball. It just happens to catch him. So, like, McCaffrey fumbling, he never does that.
Yeah.
And when does he do it? Not just when they have the ball, when they have the ball marching inside the 10-yard line. So the 49ers didn't play a bad game. There wasn't necessarily a bad game plan. It was just, damn, that ball bounces funny, and it just never wants to seem to bounce in the 49ers.
I know you and I still disagree on that. I say the guy should fall on it versus trying to pick it up.
My thing, and I know that's the old school, but remember, Pinky, my thing wasn't necessarily that the guy shouldn't fall on it. It's that some guys, it's just the way football's always been. Some guys catch the ball really well with their body. Some guys catch the ball with their hands. And when you're talking about returners and even guys jumping on it, it can bounce out from underneath you. If you were a guy who catches with his hands, which is what great wide receivers are always taught to do, not let it get into your chest, McLeod being a hands guy, picking it up might actually be the best option for him, even though it's not quote unquote the thing that's always been taught to do. So I don't fault him for that. I think if that's what you're more comfortable with, if that's how you feel as a wide receiver, do it. I don't think there's a right or he could have fallen on it. It could have squibbed out on a scrum and guys could have tried to murder him and it could have gone to the Chiefs anyways. So it's like Greg said, there are 12 little things that happen and none of those 12 little things went the 49ers' way.
Here's the thing I'll say about Ray-Ray McLeod is he has had us nervous as a returner for like 2 straight seasons. I doubt he's back. Like, he's not been the most sure-handed guy. I wouldn't call him a hands guy even. Like, I see him catching into his chest all the time.
I don't mean
I know.
per se. Okay.
What I chalk it up to is that no matter what you're told, in that moment, it's that, oh shit. And he had the phenomenal situational awareness to recognize that it had hit the guy's foot. Yeah. In that moment, that was incredible. And he tried to make a play on it. He made the wrong play, but it's a split second, oh shit decision. And I know we like to pile on guys, and as much as he's caused me stress over the years and I'm not his biggest fan, like, it's more, I point to it as, yes, that was a mistake. It wasn't the mistake. I think it was probably the most influential and impactful mistake of the game because of the field position and the touchdown that followed right after and all that. But I also give him a little bit of grace just because it's a split second thing and you're human and mistakes happen.
Well, and the fact that it really did just kind of grace the guy for it. Like you said, the situational awareness, even realized that he needed to try and even jump on it was amazing. So, tough break for 49ers fans. No doubt, you guys, you're going to be there again next year. So it's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds and what they do to try and get over the hump.
Well, if we do, we're breaking a curse. It's been quite a long time since the Super Bowl loser had a good season the next year. So, we'll knock on some wood and hope it works out. But nothing is guaranteed.
First time Super Bowl appearance quarterbacks that lose have never made it back to the Super Bowl. Well, I shouldn't say never. The last 18 that's happened to haven't made it back. Going back, I think it's to like 1991 or 92, something like that. So If that
I
curse
feel great now.
continues-
Thank you.
Well, if that curse continues, maybe they should seriously consider starting Darnold next year.
Well, Darnold's
the
not going to be on the
level's
Niners.
there around him, right? So let's just see what happens.
Darnold's probably not on the 49ers next year.
Well, maybe you should start a petition, Greg, and make sure that things go differently. No, in all honesty, funny enough, and we can talk about this later and kind of on the side when you come back and stuff. But Pinky and I have talked about this very briefly, and we'll talk about it more in the offseason. But teaser alert, audience.
No
Darnold
one's
to the
listening anymore.
Darnold to the Broncos is not a bad idea. Just throwing it out there right now.
Anybody?
It's not a good idea either, but
With that being said, Greg, honestly, once the playoffs get announced, we should try and get you on either, depending on how the schedule lays out, right before or right after those first couple games. And
there's usually a gap before they start up. So
usually
we'll
just have us being on Tuesdays. It always kind of I haven't looked that far out to see when the playoff games are supposed to start. I think last year we were doing a show the same night as the first game. So we'll have to get you on to do that. That would be a lot of fun. As always, dude, love the information, the insights, your knowledge. It's always awesome going back and forth and chatting it up with you. For those that haven't already favorited it, honestly, go check out thekingsherald.com. Even if you're not a Kings fan, the content they put out and their insights and the way they discuss the game and the team is quality. So I do recommend it.
To follow at GWIS on Twitter. His Twitter comments are hilarious throughout the day, every day.
I've actually taken a step back the last week or two. I've tried to be doing a little less Twitter, but
he literally put out Julius Pepperwood today, and I died laughing. And not many people would know what that is, but I know what that is.
Tim Bontemps sounds exactly like Julius Pepperwood. So that's a niche tweet. I mean, you got to know who both those people are, but it's
you guys don't know.
No clue.
But I know.
Follow this guy. But Greg, thank you. Appreciate you. Sip on that Colorado Kool-Aid all you want, my guy.
Thanks for having me out, guys.
To each their own as far as what you decide to follow and spend your time with. But if you're doing that with us, look, we say it every week, but we always mean it. We can't thank you enough. We can't show the true appreciation that it means to us. But thank you. And as always, do not waste those moments with your loved ones, family, friends, inner circle. Cherish them. Take advantage of them. Do not waste them. Do not take them for granted. Until next week, everybody. Cheers.
Yeah.
We're out.
Cheers.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast's racking up the flame out. So high, I might